Dr. Wallace, right away.
Hand in Glove by Stephen Mulrine. A good shaking. A good shaking.
I should have been called out earlier. God, these people will do anything to save 5 shillings. It's criminal negligence. I mean, look at the place. Imagine bringing a child into this. A whole damn brood of them.
I take it you attended at the birth, Dr. Skinner. She's your patient.
No, the husband's not in my panel. I should think he's unemployed. These are the product of his leisure hours, no doubt. No, she's not my patient, but I was called out to the birth. Yes. Midwife ran into some difficulty, usual story. That would have been about 3 months ago. Poor little bugger's well out of it, in my view.
And you initially diagnosed pneumonia.
Contributory to cause of death, yes. But I'm not happy about this. There's serious neglect for a start. The child can't have been anybody's pride and joy. Not in this midden. And I don't like that bruising on the upper arms.
You think she might have done away with it? I agree about the contusions. You must have good eyesight to have spotted them.
I carry a pocket torch, Dr. Wallace. It's not the first time I've been left in the dark in one of these places. Why, they can afford to drink, but they can't put a few pence aside for the meter.
Aye, or a few bob for the doctor.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, can you remember what the birth complications were?
Well, I'm not sure if I can, but I think it was a forceps delivery. And the midwife, now don't ask me if she was qualified or not, had to call me in. There was some hemorrhaging, I think. Nothing serious. I administered ergometrine. After that, the midwife took over. I've given Mrs. Dwyer a sedative. You won't get much sense out of her.
I'll have a word with her anyway. Does she know what's happened?
Oh, why? I should think so.
Mrs. Dwyer. Mrs. Dwyer? Are you up to talking? What was the baby's name? What was she called?
Oh, Sarah. Oh, God, Sarah.
She never had a chance, Doctor. She was never right, God help her.
Mrs. Dwyer, how long had Sarah been ill?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
She had that cough for weeks, and the diarrhea. She was never right. She couldn't get a breath. Isn't that so, Agnes? Agnes, tell the doctor.
That's right, Doctor. Couldn't get a breath.
Mrs. Dwyer, this can't have been sudden. You must have seen she was in a bad way. Why didn't you send for Dr. Skinner?
Sure, can't you see she's in no fit state herself? She couldn't get up. And I'm at my work the whole day. And by the time I got in, well...
And what time was that, Mr. Dwyer?
Oh, late. Quite late. After 6 o'clock, I think. And then I sees her all blue in the face, like she can't get a breath.
This was at 6 o'clock.
Chrissy there, I tell you. Isn't that right, girl?
Chris is your daughter? Is she the eldest?
Aye, she's been looking after the wife. It's been a terrible time, Doctor, I tell you. Chrissy, what's the matter with you? Have you lost your tongue?
Mr. Dwyer, Dr. Skinner says you're not on his panel. Don't you pay insurance through your work?
Aha. Well, now, I would if I was able, sir. But I have to take what work I can get. No questions asked. You know what I mean?
Mr. Dwyer, I'd like a word with your wife in private, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. We'll just leave you now, Agnes, all right? Go easy on her, Doctor, please. She's not a well woman.
Mrs. Dwyer. Agnes. There's no easy way to say this, but I have to tell you, Dr. Skinner's concerned about some bruising on Sarah's arms.
Bruises?
Aye. Now, can you think of anything that might have caused them? Anything that might have hurt her?
Oh, no. Oh, no, God, no.
Doctor, she's in a terrible state, I swear to God. She's been like this for weeks. She doesn't know what she's doing half the time.
It's all right, Agnes. It's all right. Just try and get some sleep. I'll leave you in peace. Dr. Skinner, if you wouldn't mind. Now, Mr. Dwyer, Dr. Skinner has observed some marks on Sarah's body that we think need explaining. When you saw her at 6 o'clock, Is it possible there was anything else wrong with her? She was having difficulty breathing, blue in the face, you said. Was there anything else?
Anything else?
Well, had she vomited? Was her nose bleeding? Was there any blood from her ears, say?
Oh, God, she was never done vomiting, the poor mite. But no, nothing I could see. Listen, Doctor, for God's sake, don't be too hard on Agnes. She's not been right in the head, if you know what I mean. Not since she had her.
Well, Dr. Skinner isn't prepared to sign the death certificate, and nor am I. Not until I've examined Sarah properly.
Yeah? I don't know what you mean, properly.
A post-mortem examination, Mr. Dwyer, to establish the cause of death.
Mother of God, no. She isn't right, I tell you. She's not responsible. Doctor, I swear to God she loved that child. Agnes, for God's sake, tell the man, you wouldn't have harmed wee Sarah. Not ever.
Mr. Dwyer, I think what your wife needs now is rest. Rest, do you hear? Thank you, Dr. Wallace. I take it you'll make the arrangements.
Yes.
Desperate business altogether. Need sterilising these people.
We'll have the soup now, Mrs. Hamilton.
Right-o, Mrs. Wallace.
I think everybody's ready. Not before time.
I'm sorry, Margaret. I couldn't get away. One of those cottages out on the Alloa Road. And I'm sure you wouldn't want me to sit down before I'd changed.
Indeed I wouldn't. From what I hear about those places, I've half a mind to have you fumigated.
Oh.
Anyway, I just hope you're in the mood for burnt offerings. Mrs. Hamilton's about demented. You might at least have phoned to say you were going to be late.
Well, I'm sorry. I didn't manage. There was a phone box at the end of the road, but it was out of order, of course.
Mm-hmm. The local savings bank.
What was the case, Dad? Pretty grim, I suppose.
Oh, aye. As they come. Suspected child murder.
Oh, no.
The local GP wouldn't sign the certificate. He's probably right. We'll find out tomorrow anyway, when I do the post-mortem.
David, if we're going to have the details, keep it technical, please. I don't think I want to hear this. No soup for me, Mrs. Hamilton, thanks.
Are you sure, ma'am?
Yes, thanks.
Doctor.
Please.
So what age was the child?
3 months, I think.
Oh, no.
The name's Dwyer. About 5 or 6 children, all in the one room by the look of it. Cause of death, pneumonia, apparently. But there's some severe contusions on the upper arms. I'll not be surprised to find subdural hemorrhaging, too. Dr. Skinner thought it might be the mother, but she didn't look as if she had the strength, frankly. Skinner had given her a sedative, of course.
It could be postnatal depression, don't you think?
Maybe, but I wouldn't fancy it as a defence.
Dr. Ibbotson thinks the law doesn't make enough allowances for women like that. Well, not in Scotland, at any rate.
Oh, dear, I think I hear an axe about to be ground.
Well, it's not me you have to convince, Barbara.
And I think I'd rather hear spoons being rattled. Take your soup before it gets cold.
Sorry, Mum.
To be honest, I wonder if we don't sometimes make too many excuses for people not taking care of their children. They bring the poor mites into this world, God help them. Their welfare should be their first concern.
Well, sometimes their first concern is a couple of hours' sleep or their next drink.
It's very sad. Oh, Barbara, I nearly forgot. Susan Toms had a baby.
Oh.
Susan Henry as she is now. She was in your class at school, wasn't she? A wee boy. Her mother's delighted, of course.
Well, that's great. A bully for Susan. I'll be the only one left soon.
Barbara, what are you doing?
Oh, Mum, well, do you mind terribly if I don't stay for the rest? Or you can keep it for me and I'll heat it up when I get home. There's a breech birth due later tonight and I'd really like to be there. It's the first chance I'll have to get to see one and I might even
I
have a...
don't believe I'm hearing right. Barbara, are you telling me you're going back to Edinburgh this evening? You've hardly been in the house 10 minutes and you're going out again.
Dad, it's a breech. I've never seen it done. I might have to tackle one of my own someday. It's invaluable experience.
It sounds like the sort of thing most young women would go a very long way to avoid.
And am I most young women?
Well, you're not Susan Tom, God knows. And at times I'm glad of that. But there's other times when
Mum, I need all the clinical experience I can get. I really do. Dad, I hate to impose, but the last train from Stirling's at 9 o'clock. Well, you couldn't run me to the station.
Barbara, we're in the middle of dinner.
A ruined dinner, moreover. What on earth time do you expect to be home?
I've no idea. I suppose I can find a bed in the clinic.
Indeed, I hope not. You can surely find a decent hotel. God knows what you might catch in a place like that.
Mum, that's precisely why I should be there. It's one more pair of hands, even if they're not very skilled.
Right, come on, come on. I'll take you to the station. I'm sorry, Margaret, but I'll get no peace.
Don't apologise to me. It's Mrs. Hamilton you should be apologising to.
I'll be 10 minutes, no longer.
Thanks a million, Dad. You've no idea how grateful I am. This is a really serious case. The poor woman's anaemic into the bargain, and I don't think she'd even seen a doctor till the midwife called in Dr. Ibbotson. And some old neighbour had told her to drink milk stout.
She could do worse. Right then, are we ready?
I'll be back as soon as I can. Oh, by the way, what was that woman's name? That case you attended?
Mrs. Dwyer. I think she could be another argument for that clinic of yours.
Dr. Ibbotson! Dr. Ibbotson, what happened? I went to the address in the Cowgate and they said you brought her back here. Is she all right?
Oh, Barbara, I'm so sorry. It didn't look good and we decided on a caesarean. You've missed it all. I'm sorry.
I knew I should have stayed in Edinburgh. I just didn't think it would be so soon. How is she?
She's fine. She'll be coming round in about another hour. The baby's just lovely. A boy, 8.5 pounds. We were worried about the cord. Mrs. Gillespie was scared we'd lose him. She's the local midwife. She'll be here shortly. Anyway, she performed heroics, but in the end we had to do a section. Listen, go and have a look at the baby, then come along to my office. I've a pot of coffee on. And cheer up, Babs. There'll be plenty more.
Well, she's certainly better off here. That place in the Cowgate didn't look any too hygienic.
Oh, you'd be surprised. Don't be taken in by all those newspapers on the floor. They're as good as clean sheets. It's an old midwife's trick. They reckon half the babies born in working-class homes in Britain make their first appearance on the front page of the Daily Mirror. I did my own obstetric practice in Dublin, at the Rotunda.
That's supposed to be very good, isn't it?
It is. Some of the houses we had to go into. The midwives always laid their hats and coats on newspaper as well, to keep the bugs off.
Oh.
You can learn a lot from a good midwife.
My mother would have a fit at the very idea of a home birth, let alone a single end in the Cowgate.
Well, middle-class girls don't go in for home births.
No, I suppose not. God, half the girls I went to school with are proud mums these days. My mother mentioned another one this evening. Well, just in passing, of course.
Well, also just in passing, have any of your school friends died in childbirth? I'm sorry, that sounds terrible, but...
Actually, yes. Oh, two that I know of. One of them was quite close. Not a best friend, but one of our group, you know. Annabelle died a few days after the birth. Oh, it was tragic. Her mother's bringing up her wee girl. Dr. Ibbotson, why did you ask that?
I'd rather you called me Mary. No, I just thought I'd ask because my experience, I mean, not just Dublin but here as well, is that mortality's actually higher in hospital births.
Really?
Oh yes. You're safer at home by and large, even if it's none too clean. Your father's Dr. David Wallace, the pathologist.
I didn't think I'd ever mentioned him.
Oh, everybody knows him. He's quite famous, isn't he? Anyway, I think he'd confirm that maternal mortality rates are lower when there's no doctor in attendance at all, even for home births. I wouldn't ask him about that, Babs. Not if you want to keep on his right side. You're not planning to go into obstetrics?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Surgery, if I get the chance.
That's a pity. You'll have a tough job elbowing all these men out of your road. You really will.
Well, it's a challenge.
Obstetrics is even more of a challenge if you're going to take on the male establishment. Believe me, Babs, I know. It's like a priesthood, and the sort that go in for human sacrifice. So, after your 4 weeks here, where next?
Oh, I don't know. I've been applying to do clinical practice in various hospitals. Edinburgh looks like a dead loss, and Stirling's out. I'm still waiting to hear from the Glasgow Royal. I don't want my father to pull any strings.
No, I can understand that. You know, when I was in Dublin, the midwives wouldn't take their lunch along with the ward nurses. They were absolutely terrified of infection. Puerperal sepsis is the big killer, of course. And you've just left a pathologist cutting up cadavers on a daily basis. I shouldn't even be in the same room with you.
Oh, that's just reminded me. Dr. Ibbotson, is that the admissions register? Do you mind if I have a look at it?
Of course.
You remember you asked me to write in the details of the woman in bed 6? The termination? Well, I sort of flicked through it and I noticed a name scored through in red. Mrs. Dwyer. It's a few weeks back. Oh, this is it. Alloa Road. That would be right. I think that's possibly my father's latest case.
Oh, God, she's not dead, is she? Oh, I wouldn't be surprised.
No. It's not the mother, it's a child. Can you remember anything about her?
I certainly can. I think the red pen was as much fury as anything else. Oh, heavens, look at the time.
Oh, I know. I'm really sorry, Dr. Ibbotson. It's my fault. I was hoping I might be able to stay the night here.
No. I'll run you home. I don't want a demented pathologist on my tail.
What?
All those knives.
Well, it's my mother I'm frightened of.
And please, it's Mary. Now, come on, Babs, grab your coat. Mrs. Gillespie will mind the shop for an hour or two, and I'll tell you about the Dwyer menage in the car.
Thanks, Mary. I'm really grateful. And please, not Babs. I hate the name.
I don't know how she found out about us. Maybe through a neighbour or possibly the midwife. But she's had a very bad time. From what I gather, there were complications, and the local GP had to be called in, a Dr. Skinner. Whether it was his incompetence or just her general condition, she's what we call a grand multipar. I think this was her 5th or 6th child. Anyway, she's been hemorrhaging persistently, and she somehow managed to make her way to the clinic about 6 weeks ago. I wanted to admit her for a hysterectomy, but I'm afraid we weren't allowed to.
Weren't allowed to? I don't understand.
Her husband wouldn't agree to it.
What? Surely if her health was suffering. I mean, what grounds did he give?
Well, he doesn't have to give any. She can't have an operation without his consent. That's that. But as far as I know, it wasn't on any kind of moral, ethical principle. He just didn't fancy looking after the other 5 kids while she was in the hospital.
I can't believe that. It's scandalous. I mean, surely she has a right to treatment, no matter what he fancies.
Yes, well, I wrote on her behalf to Dr. Skinner, but of course, he doesn't want to get involved. And he more or less ticked me off for interfering. I think it's the idea that someone like Mrs. Dwyer might get treated free in Edinburgh when there's a perfectly good cottage hospital on our doorstep.
Which she's no doubt got a financial interest in.
Now, Barbara, I didn't say that.
Oh, it's what you were thinking.
Well, people have a right to earn money. Which way do we go now?
Oh, sorry. Left. And it's just around the corner, there, with a sort of Art Nouveau lantern above the gate. Oh, heavens, it's nearly 2 o'clock. Well, this is so kind of you, Mary.
Think nothing of it. Will they be waiting up for you?
Oh, hope not. Though Dad might, if he's got some reading to do. Actually, his study light's on.
My goodness, isn't this what the magazines call an imposing pile?
A Gothic folly, rather. Listen, why don't you come in for a coffee?
No. I'll have to relieve Mrs. G. Anyway, I wouldn't want to get envious.
Oh, touché.
Barbara, was that a car outside?
Sorry I'm so late, Dad. Dr. Ibbotson gave me a run home. Oh, you shouldn't have waited up, but I'm glad you did. I'll just hang my coat up. I've got something to tell you about your Alloa Road case.
Barbara, keep it down. Your mother's asleep. How did your breech birth go?
Well, it didn't quite turn out as I expected. Honestly, Dad, I don't know how you can work in here. The room's like an oven. Anyway, about that poor woman, Mrs. Dwyer. Did you know that she actually attended... Dad? Dad? Are you awake? Oh dear.
I don't think there's any doubt, Detective. If you look at the pattern of these contusions, they're very clear. You see, at the back of the upper arm, just below the shoulder, there's a group of 3, maybe 4 distinct bruises.
They look like finger marks to me.
Aye. And one just over the clavicle here. See?
Uh-huh.
The same on the other side. Perfect symmetry.
So, you think she's been gripped by somebody, possibly shaken to death?
Well, it's not my job to speculate, but I doubt if there's much apart from a pair of human hands that could have produced those marks. As to the shaking, there's no visible fracture of the skull, so there's no evidence that the child was dropped or struck, but the effect is much the same. There's a good deal of extravasated blood between the bone and the brain tissue, and the tissue itself is contused over most of its surface. There are signs of bronchial congestion, but I'd put the cause of death as cranial injury inflicted by person or persons unknown.
God, she's such a pathetic wee thing. How could somebody do that?
How long have you been in the force, Mr. Curran?
Aye, you're right, sir. Long enough not to ask that.
Can you be disturbed?
Yes, surely. Was that tea?
Yes. You don't mind if I have my coffee in here with you?
You're not having tea?
No thanks. Tastes too much like wood smoke.
What? The noble Earl Grey? Barbarian. I think we gave you the right name.
Well, it does. It's horrible.
Barbara, if you'd picked your way through as many charred ruins as I have, you'd soon know the difference. Anyway, cheers. God bless you. Is your mother in?
No, she's gone through to Edinburgh. Jenner's sale's on, and I think she's meeting Gwen Archer for lunch.
Oh, dear.
Quite. She'll no doubt commiserate with Mum about her wayward daughter.
So, how did your breech birth go, anyway? I don't think I've seen you since.
Well, it didn't happen. They decided to take her in for a caesarean, which I missed, of course, having gone to the home address by mistake. I was about to tell you last night, but you dozed off. Anyway, Dad, I wanted to ask you about that baby. The post-mortem.
Oh, the Dwyer case, yes. The report's gone to the fiscal. I'm afraid it is child murder.
And do they know who did it?
It's difficult to say. The police will be interviewing them today, I imagine, but the woman certainly appeared to be living on her nerves.
No.
Maybe she just snapped.
Oh, Dad, there's things you should know about that family. And Dr. Skinner.
The GP?
Did you know her husband wouldn't consent to her having a hysterectomy, and that Skinner more or less abandoned her after he'd done what he gets paid for?
Barbara, ideals are all well and good when you don't have responsibilities.
Dad, it's not the money I'm concerned about.
Oh, that must be a first.
It's the way that poor woman's been treated, and the fact that everybody's assuming it was her. That husband of hers wouldn't consent because he couldn't be bothered looking after his own children.
Barbara, I'm not assuming anything. That's the pathologist's bedtime prayer. I'm sure I've told you often enough. Please, God, don't let me jump to any conclusions. Oh, come on. I know how you feel, and I agree about the law.
Yes. Well, that's if
But
she's guilty.
even if her husband is a self-centred swine, the law won't excuse her on that account.
Dad, no matter what you say, you're still talking as if you're certain it was her. Why couldn't it have been him?
Well, that's for the police to find out. And until there's a court case, my job's done. Your coffee's cold.
So is your tea.
Mrs. Kennedy's looking well. I couldn't stop to talk to her, but you've checked her wound this morning.
Yes. Her temperature's normal. There's still very slight leakage, but I think she's healing up nicely. Oh, and the baby looks an absolute picture.
Oh, they always do with a caesarean. Smooth as silk. There ought to be a medical name for it. Barbara, I've a case coming in later this morning. She's a diabetic. Shouldn't be too serious, but you might want to sit in while I'm advising her.
Mary, if I'm not needed for anything urgent here, I wonder if you'd like me to follow up on that case in Stirling. You know, the woman who needed the hysterectomy.
Mrs. Dwyer. Barbara, do you think that's wise?
How do you mean?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is more amateur sleuthing than postnatal care.
Yeah, I suppose you're right, in a sense, but I just can't get her out of my mind. My father has all the forensic evidence he needs, he says, but well, I think somebody ought to be talking to that poor woman.
I'm sure they will be.
I mean, apart from the police. What do you think?
Well, I think you'll go and see her no matter what I say. And I'd probably do the same in your place. But be careful, all right?
So I have your blessing?
Barbara, I'm a doctor, not the Mother Superior. But yes, you can tell a white lie or two in my name. It'll get your foot in the door with any luck. Just watch you don't lose your toes.
Aye, what is it?
Mrs. Dwyer?
What do you want?
Mrs. Dwyer, I wonder if I could have a word with you.
Is it the police?
No. Could I come in for a minute? Dr. Ibbotson sent me, the Mother and Child Clinic in Jeffrey Street. You went to see her about a month ago.
Oh, aye. You better come in. Lift these shirts on the side where you'll get a seat. What did you say your name was?
It's Wallace. Dr. Wallace. I'm assisting Dr. Ibbotson. You spoke to her last month. How are you keeping?
Oh, well, not much better to tell you the truth. Not much you can do with that, though.
You're still bleeding?
Aye, sort of.
Mrs. Dwyer, from what Dr. Ibbotson has told me, you need treatment very urgently. You can't just let it go. You could be putting your life at risk. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, I understand. Why would I know? I'm no stupid. But doesn't matter much now, does it?
What do you mean?
I mean, after what happened with Sarah.
Oh, Mrs. Dwyer, I'm really terribly sorry about your daughter. Maybe I can help. If you tell me what happened to her. What did happen to Sarah?
Look, I thought you were here to see who I was. I thought the doctor, what's her name?
Dr. Ibbotson, yes. I'm here on her behalf.
She was a really nice person. That's life, and couldn't have been helped. He just couldn't take on the kids as well as his work. You can't blame him.
Mrs. Dwyer, please. Tell me what happened with Sarah.
I don't know. She must have been getting on my nerves. Can't you remember? She had a terrible chest on her. Couldn't get a breath. Greeting all the time. These houses are that damp, you know. I suppose I must have... I suppose it was... Look, are you here to examine me or what?
Yes, I'm sorry. If you wouldn't mind getting up on the bed.
Oh. It's a terrible mess. I just never seem to go to bed. Chrissy helps sometimes, or at least she used to, but she's never in these days.
Chrissy's your eldest daughter.
Spends all her time up at that station. Must be boys that are fascinated with trains.
Mrs. Dwyer, is there something the matter with your foot?
Eh? Oh, I don't know what you mean.
Can you put your foot down on the floor? Flat on the floor. Right.
Oh, it's nothing. I turned my ankle a while back. It's all right if I take it easy. It's not as if I'm going to be running anywhere.
More's a pity. Mrs. Dwyer, would you sit up on the bed, please?
My leg's fine. It's no it that's the problem.
Mrs. Dwyer. Well, that's a fracture. Well, when did this happen? Has it been treated? Oh, it's not even properly set. Have you seen a doctor about this?
Listen, there's nothing you can do. Just leave well alone. I've enough to worry me.
What happened to Sarah? What happened to your daughter, Mrs. Dwyer?
God almighty, just leave me alone, will you? I don't want to talk about it. Police will be here soon enough. Oh my God, is that the time? He'll be in any minute.
Mrs. Dwyer, I only want to help. You've got to get help. You're in no fit state.
Listen, lassie, you better go. There isn't any point in looking at me anyway. I'll tell you what's wrong. There's a wee show that can't be helped. I'll just have to put up with it. Oh, please. I know you mean well, but just let me get on.
Mrs. Dwyer, what are these? I'm sorry, I couldn't help noticing them.
That's my work. I need to finish it if you don't mind.
Your work? These shirts?
Aye, a day buttonhole and sometimes collars and cuffs.
Mrs. Dwyer, you should be in bed. You should be lying down at the very least. Are you telling me you're sewing these things?
Aye. Maybe you wouldn't understand, but I need the money, you know. I get 4pence a shirt. And the wains have got to be fed somehow.
I thought your husband had a job.
Listen, Hen. You better go to here before he comes in, and he'll be in any minute. I've said all I'm going to say. I couldn't help myself with wee Sarah. God forgive me. But I'll take whatever's coming to me. I just want to see the wains are well looked after. No, please, if you don't mind.
Mrs. Dwyer, please.
No,
if you could just...
no, will you, for God's sake? Oh my God, I tell you.
Mr. Dwyer?
Frank, this is... I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name.
Dr. Wallace.
Doctor? What doctor?
She's for the Dawn Clinic in Edinburgh. I've told her I'm fine. She's just going.
That's right, Mr. Dwyer. I've told your wife she should try and rest more. She needs to put her feet up now and again. That would make a difference.
What difference?
Well, to her general health.
Aye. And did you examine her mind?
I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean.
Is she right in the head? That's what I mean. Hey, are you not a bit young to be a doctor?
Mr. Dwyer, what can you tell me about your wife's broken leg?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Frank, I turned my ankle, that's all. It was a couple of weeks ago. I didn't mention it. I didn't want you making a fuss.
Mr. Dwyer, your wife's had a fractured leg. It's not been attended to. She might never walk properly again.
I twisted my ankle. For God's sake, will you get out of this house? Oh,
You see what I mean?
I'll get on my way.
No, it's not that uncommon. I don't have the figures. We've had about 3 this year already. Ectopics usually happen in the fallopian tubes, but I have seen them in the peritoneal cavity. This one's not too far on, thank God, but she's still at risk. We'll just take it nice and easy. You know, Barbara, I'm really alarmed about Mrs. Dwyer, and I'm not sure what you can do. There was nothing like that when I saw her. I examined her myself. She was in poor health, certainly, but what you're describing must have happened after her visit here.
And there might have been some bruising. The room wasn't well lit and I didn't get time, as I've said. Oh, Mary, I'm convinced that woman's been beaten by her husband, and quite possibly because she'd come here, made his miserable life just a wee bit more complicated for him.
Yes, but that's only a surmise. I'm sure your father would be quick to tell you.
Oh, I know. He's an absolute fiend for hard facts. Mr. Gradgrind's got nothing on him.
Gradgrind, you say? Sure, I don't know the fella. Now, who would he be? That's better. You can't afford to let it get you down, Barbara, or you won't last 10 minutes. You need to be able to switch off.
Oh, I suppose so. Actually, Mary, what really depressed me, that cottage, it's a real hellhole. I'm sure it's as bad as any of those places in Dublin. I don't think there was a clean surface in it anywhere, or a clean object, except this great mound of about 3 or 4 dozen white dress shirts, all interleaved with tissue paper, you know?
Yes, she'll be an outworker for one of these sweatshops. God, that won't be doing her condition any good.
No, that's what I told her. Anyway, she was buttonholing these things and sewing on the collars at 4p a time. 4p? And that swine of a husband walks in, staggers in rather. Oh, it makes me sick, honestly.
Oh, yes. And he'll be looking for his tea on the table.
Aye, once she's cleared away the shirts.
Anyway. Right, Miss Wallace. Are you ready to assist at your first ectopic?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Yes?
Good evening, ma'am. Detective Constable Curran. I wonder if I might have a word with the doctor, if it's not inconvenient.
Well, the doctor and Mrs. Wallace are at dinner just now, but if you'd like to wait in the hall.
Oh, that'll be fine. I'm in no hurry.
Good heavens, Mr. Curran, how long have you been here?
Oh, a couple of minutes. It's no problem. I've been admiring your pictures.
I should think you could probably paint them from memory. Mrs. Hamilton really should have let me know. Come in. Come into the study. Sit down, Mr. Curran. Make yourself comfortable. Can I offer you something to drink?
Oh,
You're not on duty, surely? A quiet Sunday night?
no, I'm off today. As far as anyone's ever off in our line of work.
Ah, well, you can take this wee dram into custody. There you are, Mr. Curran. Interrogate that.
Glenmorangie?
It is indeed. Not bad for a youngster. Now, to what do I owe the pleasure, as they say?
Well, I thought you might like to know how the Dwyer case is turning out.
I am afraid there's not much more I can tell you from my end.
No, it doesn't look like it'll go to trial anyway. Mrs. Dwyer's confessed.
She has?
Made a full statement late last night. It confirms your own findings, at least as I recall them. She says the baby was crying constantly. She couldn't stand it anymore. There was nobody else in the house. Nobody to help, that is. Mr. Dwyer and the oldest girl were out. Anyway, she doesn't know what came over her. She just picked the child up and gave it a good shaking to make it stop.
A good shaking? Do you believe her?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Is it possible she's covering something up? Was her husband there when you took her statement?
Well, he was, as a matter of fact. Actually, he just sat in a corner with his head between his hands. He looked completely shattered. Didn't so much as glance up at her.
Was he sober?
Oh, I'd say so. You know, he's got a long pedigree in Stirling. Desk sergeant calls him by his first name. Drunk and disorderlies mostly. A few assaults. Lately, the odd housebreaking. They actually like him, would you believe? Then again, they don't have to live with him.
Mr. Curran. Oh, here. Let me top that up for you.
Oh, God, I shouldn't do that. No. Thank you.
Mr. Curran, I get the feeling you're not here just to bring me up to date on the case. I mean, it's a tragic business, God knows, but it's not all that uncommon. Is there something else bothering you?
Well, to be quite honest, Dr. Wallace, I just don't believe that woman killed her own child. Oh, she confessed and all that, but I mean, she could hardly bring herself even to say the words. And the impression I got was that she'd have been more likely to kill herself if she thought it would put bread in their mouths. You know what I mean?
Aye.
And the thought occurred to me. Now, it's a bit far drawn, maybe, but, well, at the post-mortem, You were talking about bruising on the child's arms. The marks have been made by somebody's hands.
And you were wondering whether I could say for sure if they were a man's hands or a woman's.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but something like that, I suppose.
Unfortunately, no. The marks just aren't distinct enough. I wouldn't go to court on them, if that's what you mean.
Well,
As I say, it wouldn't stand up in court, and I doubt if the fiscal would proceed anyway against Mrs. Dwyer's own confession. You've no witnesses apart from her?
no. See, well, the other children are too young, and the eldest girl, Chrissy, she just keeps out the road. I mean, you can hardly blame her.
Of course, we know the contusions won't make a case, but I wonder if Dwyer does.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, this is entirely off the record, Mr. Curran, and if you quote me, I'll swear it was the Glenmorangie talking, but if you think Dwyer did it, you might just try blinding him with forensic science. Or forensic alchemy, in this case.
You cheeky devil!
Evening, Mr. Dwyer. Mind if I sit down with you?
Oh, God almighty, it's the police.
You can introduce me if you like.
Oh, but what do you mean, the police? Frank, are you in trouble again?
Look, son, I can't remember your name, but you heard what happened. There's nothing I can tell you. She's confessed it, hasn't she?
Confessed what? Who are you talking about?
That's all right, Sadie. Don't get bloody aerated. It's Agnes. She's done something. It's her that's in trouble. It's nothing to do with me.
Well, that's what I wanted to discuss with you, Mr. Dwyer. There's a couple of things I need to get straight, and now's as good a time as any. You're not the easiest man in the world to find. Oh, I'm Detective Constable Curran, miss. Local CID. I didn't catch your name.
Look, Frank, I don't want nothing to do with the police, right? Oh, Jesus, I've got enough problems without that. I'm getting out now. If you want me, right, you know where I'll be.
Sadie.
Right there.
Sadie.
Be there, right there.
Hey, Sadie. Sadie, hey, come back. Oh, bloody bitch.
I think I've upset your friend, Mr. Dwyer. Sorry about that. Occupational hazard.
Look, don't get smart with me, son. The wife's given her statement. You got nothing on me. A fella does a few houses, and you people think you can hang anything on him. She's confessed. What more do you want? That's my daughter she's killed. I'll not get over that. But she'll take whatever's coming to her.
Well, you see, Mr. Dwyer, I'm not sure about that. And I'll come straight to the point. Well, you might even be able to catch up with Sadie. I won't keep you long. Thing is, the pathologist that examined your daughter's body, Sarah's body, thinks the bruises on her arms and back were caused by a man's grip. It was a man's hands that shook her to death.
Oh, aye. Left his fingerprints on her vest, did he?
You're really something, Mr. Dwyer. Anyway, Dr. Wallace isn't convinced that it was your wife that killed Sarah.
She's confessed, hasn't she? You got it all down in black and white.
Aye, but we're talking about black and blue now, Mr. Dwyer. A man's hands shaking the life out of a 3-month-old baby.
Hey. Just hold your water. You think it's a mug you got here? Let's see your hands on the table, eh? Come on, just out of interest. Flat on the table, all right? Dear God. That's a right brace of meat hooks you got there, Constable.
Detective Constable.
Aye. Well, take a look at these.
Well. Who'd have believed it? You could have been a concert pianist, Mr. Dwyer.
Aye. Funny thing, too. The wife's hands look like shovels. It'll be all that hard work.
David, it's not time you were getting dressed. What time's this dinner at?
I think it's 8 for 8:30 on the invitation.
Well, that's after 7:30 now, and if you've got to drive up to Bridge of Allen...
I'd better get organised. Oh, these police functions never start on time, but I suppose I should get there early, have a look at my notes.
What notes? Is that what you're doing just now? David, are you speaking at this dinner?
Aye. Oh, I'll not turn the stomachs, though. Latest developments in blood typing.
And you're still writing your speech. Are you mad?
It's finding jokes that's the hard part. But don't worry, Margaret, I've finished.
Is this the invitation?
Aye, it's some sort of bunfest for the retiring Chief Constable.
Sir Hector's retiring?
It's a bit of a misnomer in his case, I agree.
Well, you'll be glad to see the back of him. Dress formal? Oh, my God, David, you'd better be moving right now. Oh, I expect that'll be Barbara to let us know she's overnighting in some rat-infested hole. Hello, Barbara? Oh, hold on, please. David, it's for you. Now, for heaven's sake, remember you're going out. Just put them off, whatever it is.
Oh, I know. I know.
I'll lay your dinner suit out in here. It'll save time.
Hello? Mr. Cullen? Yes? Oh, dear. Well, it was worth a try. No. Even if it had been. No, it won't be the first time either, unfortunately. No, I should think that's unlikely.
David!
Aye. Well, thanks for phoning, Mr. Cullen. Aye. Goodbye.
Well, that was quick for a change. Who was it?
Oh, D.C. Cullen. He's in charge of the Dwyer case. Just something that had come up.
A dreadful business altogether, that. I can't understand why Barbara wants any part of it. I know somebody has to try and help these poor souls, but it'd break my heart.
Well, there's no stopping her, Margaret. I think I'd be disappointed in her if there was. I'm sure you would too.
Maybe. I just wish she'd show a bit more consideration. Where on earth can she be at this time of night?
Maybe she's met a nice Edinburgh lawyer.
God forbid.
Chrissy? Excuse me. Are you Chrissy Dwyer? Aye. Could I have a word with you? Chrissy? What about? I don't know you. Chrissy, it's about your mother. And your wee sister. Are you the police? No. I'm a doctor. Well, at least I'm training to be a doctor. You know, your mother went to a clinic a while back.
In Edinburgh, aye. Didn't do her any good, did it?
Well, I think you know why that was. Oh, Chrissy. What are you doing up here? You're not going to do anything silly, are you?
I'm watching the trains.
Well, you might be on one of them someday.
Maybe.
Chrissy, can I speak with you? For your mother's sake, it's important. Would you like a cup of tea? When did you last have something to eat?
Are you sure you're not the police?
Chrissy, do I look as if I've got flat feet and weigh 13 stone? Oh, come on, Chrissy.
No, as far back as I can remember anyway. She's always had great patience for us. Michael, that's my wee brother. He laid a piece of jam down on one of her shirts once, and she roared at him. She was near in tears, I remember, but she wouldn't have hit him.
So why would she have done that to Sarah? To your baby sister? Chrissy?
I don't know.
Chrissy, I don't think you're telling the truth.
You know, your mother could go to prison. Chrissy, what happened to your mother's leg? You know she's had a broken leg.
She fell.
I don't believe that either.
What does she say?
You know fine well what she says. She says whatever your father wants her to. I want to know what you say. Why do you come up here to the station? Are you frightened to go home? Do you have to wait until your father's asleep? Is that it? Chrissy, was it your father broke your mother's leg? Did he hit her? Did he knock her down? Chrissy?
It's all right for you, isn't it? You don't need to go back. Nobody's going to kill you.
Oh, Chrissy, nobody's going to kill anybody. Not if you tell the truth. We'll make sure of that. Chrissy, I don't believe your mother could have harmed wee Sarah. You don't believe it either. We've got to get your mother to tell the truth. Why would she protect your father? She's scared stiff of him, isn't she? Because of what he's done to her.
I saw him. I saw him.
Chrissy? Tell me, please. Chrissy, what did he do to your mother?
She wouldn't stop greeting. She couldn't get a breath. Just kept coughing and greeting the whole time. I'll shut her up, he says. I'm sick of this.
Chrissy, are you talking about Sarah? Did he hurt the baby?
I've had enough of this, he says. And he lifts her up. Oh, God, the wee darling. Oh, I don't care what happens to me.
You saw him hit Sarah. You saw your father hit her.
A bloody good shaking. That'll shut her up.
David, are you decent? Good God, are you not ready yet? That's after 8 o'clock.
Oh, Margaret, you'll need to pin this cuff back or do something. There's a buttonhole missing. I can't get the link through.
Oh, no, I don't believe it. Here, give me the scissors, I'll do that. Well, honestly, you get what you pay for. This was a generous sale, 4 and 6 a bargain. Some bargain.
Oh, that's just perfect. I hope they're not blocking the driveway. That's all I need.
Mrs. Hamilton will get it. It'll be Barbara forgotten her keys again. Would you stand still? I should have known better. I don't know how they can even make these things for 4 and 6.
Dad! Dad! Oh, thank God you're still here.
Barbara, for heaven's sake, we don't have time for you now. Your father's late already.
Dad, it's about Mrs. Dwyer.
Barbara, I'm going out. I'm sorry.
Dad, I know Mrs. Dwyer didn't do it. I can prove
Oh,
it.
Barbara, for God's sake, the woman's confessed. What can I do?
Dad, her daughter saw everything. Chrissy saw him do it.
David, you can't stop now. Look at the time.
Chrissy saw the whole thing, Dad, and she's willing to give evidence.
She'll make a statement.
Yes. Dad, I've given my word she'll be safe.
Right.
David, don't do this.
Where is she now?
Mum, oh, she's outside in the taxi. You couldn't lend me £1, could you?
David, what are you doing?
Mum, I've told Chrissy she could stay the night here. You don't mind, do you?
Oh, no. Mrs. Hamilton will be overjoyed.
Operator, 547, please.
David! Oh, I don't believe this.
Hello. CID. Hello. Dr. Wallace here. I wonder if I could have a word with D.C. Curran, please.
In A Good Shaking, the part of Dr. Wallace was played by Martin James, Mrs. Dwyer by Alexis Daly, and Mr. Dwyer by Owen Kavanagh. Mrs. Wallace was played by Jan Moffat, Barbara by Meg Fraser, and Mrs. Hamilton by Grace Glover. D.C. Curran was played by Liam Brennan, Dr. Ibbotson by Louise Beattie, and Chrissy by Sybil Winthrop. Other parts were played by members of the cast.
Dr. Wallace, right away.
Hand in Glove by Stephen Mulrine. Fast and loose. Fast and loose.
I'm afraid you've caught us a little on the hop, Gwen. This is Mrs. Hamilton's afternoon off.
Don't go to any trouble. I just thought I'd look in. I'm on my way to Bridge of Allen. Happened to be passing. So, Margaret, please, don't go to any bother. A cup of tea will do splendidly.
Yes, while she's running her slide rule over the cucumber sandwiches.
Barbara, for heaven's sake, you'd better go in and talk to her. I'll manage fine here. Go on.
What tea does she drink? She'll obviously have her special favourite. She's that type.
So does your father, so that's enough of that. Go in and ask her. Barbara, you're being very rude.
There, and tell me, Lady Archer, what's your poison in the tea sticks?
That's enough.
Margaret, please, I hope you're not making a fuss. Barbara, dear, what is your mother doing?
She means, what are you doing? Now go and see what she'd like. Go on, Barbara. I don't want her making us the talk of Edinburgh.
Her bridge club, that's more the size of it.
Barbara!
Right, all right. Lady Archer, sorry we're neglecting you. Now, what sort of tea would you prefer? We have China or Indian. Just the lower slopes, I'm afraid.
I'm sorry. Oh, Indian, please. You wouldn't happen to have orange pico?
I dare say we have.
With a slice of lemon.
Naturally.
Oh, and Barbara, dear, do you know, the best orange pico is picked on the lower slopes.
Honest to God, if that woman patronises me once more, I'll force-feed her with her own pearl choker.
Barbara, I don't know where you hear these things.
You got the tea order, I suppose?
Oh, yes. It's already in the pot. Now, take these sandwiches in and stay with her. Make conversation, for heaven's sake.
Yes, Mother. Mum's bringing the tea in a second. It's just infuriating. Oh, I mean infusing. Help yourself. Please do.
Honestly, you shouldn't have gone to all this trouble. These are very nice. Your mother was telling me you're working in Edinburgh these days, Barbara. You should call in some day. I'm still in Heriot Row. Sir Robert always talked about buying a little place in the Borders, but I'm afraid we never got round to looking. I don't think she finished telling me what you were doing. Of course, in our day, young girls thought more of home and family than of a career. I think we're none the worse of it. Work just didn't enter our minds.
Some young girls don't have any choice. It's work or starve for most people.
I'm sure. But not for someone like yourself. Margaret, I don't think you ever said what it was Barbara was doing.
Who didn't?
I think we got distracted at the Jenner sale.
Actually, I'm assisting at a mother and child clinic in Jeffrey Street. It's very interesting work. We had a placenta previa yesterday. That's an abnormal implantation, you know, where the placenta precedes the child. It causes severe hemorrhaging as a rule, quite often fatal. So Dr. Ibbotson had to do an immediate caesarean. I suppose your late husband would have seen a few of those.
I dare say he would, but I don't recall Sir Robert describing them. There are some things a woman would rather not know.
Barbara, pass Lady Archer another sandwich. Gwen, would you like some more
Well,
tea?
I don't think childbirth should be one of them. We ought to know our own bodies, surely.
Barbara.
My dear young girl, as long as it works, I've never had the least interest in finding out how. I leave that to the professionals. I don't think I know your Dr. Ibbotson. He's not on the staff of the Royal, is he?
No, she's not.
Oh, I see.
Barbara, I'm sure Lady Archer doesn't want to hear all this.
Really? Oh, I am sorry. But you did ask me about my work with Dr. Ibbotson.
Yes, I suppose I did.
She's very good. Extremely professional for a woman.
Barbara, I think we need some more hot water, if you wouldn't mind.
Of course.
Oh, and perhaps you could cut up that Dundee cake. It's in the pantry, underneath the muslin.
Heavens, Margaret, I hope that's not for me.
Oh.
I wouldn't eat a thing. I really can't stay. I'm on my way to Bridge of Allen, as I said. I thought David might be in by now.
Well, he ought to be, but you never know with him. I sometimes wish he'd chosen a more 9-to-5 branch of the profession. Was there anything in particular you wanted to see him about?
Nothing, really. Actually, I thought he might like some of Sir Robert's books. They've been cluttering up the house for 5 or 6 years now. It's time I cleared them out. I'd always hoped...
Gwen?
Anyway, he's welcome to anything he'd like. But I suppose they're all terribly old-fashioned now. Margaret, honestly, I really must go.
But Barbara's just bringing in the cake,
No,
won't you?
no, please. I'll give David a call. Maybe later this evening.
Let me see.
No, I'll find my own way out. I really must rush.
Oh, she's gone.
Yes. That's extraordinary.
Something I said?
No. No. God knows you were rude enough, but no, I don't think so.
Must be some sort of record.
Don't tell me Barbara's staying out all night again. That was her on the phone, was it?
No. Oddly enough, it was Gwen Archer.
Oh, that's right, David. I forgot to tell you. She was here this afternoon, just passing through on her way to Bridge of Allen. She said she'd give you a call, something about Robert's books, as if we don't have enough clutter of our own. What was she saying?
Actually, she never mentioned books.
David, is something wrong? You look a bit wondered. She was on the phone for ages. What did she say? Do you want me to pour you a whiskey?
Aye, please. Margaret, what do you know about her son?
What, Ronald? No more than you, I suppose. Is he still in Rhodesia? Didn't he go out there to manage some sort of plantation or something? I don't think he's ever been back, not for years anyway. Why are you asking? Has something happened to him? Oh, God. I hope there's nothing really wrong.
Well, I'm afraid so. He's dead.
Ronald Archer? David, he couldn't have been more than 30. That's terrible. And she sat there this afternoon and never even mentioned him. Don't tell me she knew.
He died a week ago, apparently, so...
And she's only just heard?
No. She was notified the day after.
Oh, my God, David. I thought there was something not right, but she sat here making small talk as if she hadn't a care in the world. And Barbara, well, you know what Barbara's like. Oh, I can't believe it. What on earth happened to him?
Well, where to begin? For a start, Ronald wasn't in Rhodesia and never has been.
What?
He's been living in Glasgow the past 6 years, in a house in the West End, with another man.
No.
Gwen hasn't seen him all that time. Apparently he left the house in Heriot Row soon after Robert died. Immediately after the funeral, in fact, according to Gwen. As if he was just waiting for his father to die, to get on with his own life.
With that kind of life, I don't wonder. Robert would have been destroyed. David, are you sure you heard her right? I can't believe this.
Oh, yes. She made herself perfectly clear. Ronald was living in Glasgow with another man. A homosexual relationship with somebody called Charles Davidson. She's known about it from the start. Says she's just cut him out of her life. Like a diseased organ. That's actually what she said. Her own words.
That's dreadful. The things you don't know and don't want to know. Why was she telling you? I mean, I know you studied under Robert, but You weren't that close.
No, she wants my professional help. Ronald died in suspicious circumstances, so there's a post-mortem.
But in Glasgow? I'm sure the fiscal there's got his own pathologist.
Indeed he has. None better. But you know what Gwen's like about Glasgow. She thinks God missed his aim when he rained fire down on Sodom.
Well, she's not likely to change her mind now. Oh, God forgive me, David. This is really terrible. And to think she was sitting here today, cool as you like. You have to marvel at her strength. You know Barbara was quite dry with her. She's never liked her, of course.
I know. Robert did his damnedest to keep women out of the profession. And he had a lot of influence. Not just the university, but the Royal as well.
That came up this afternoon, needless to say. So, what's to happen? Does she suspect foul play?
Aye, she's absolutely certain. It seems Ronald inherited a fair bit of money from his father, and according to Gwen, he's left a will, with practically everything going to this Charles Davidson. Even the house was Ronald's.
Oh. That puts a different light on things, doesn't it?
I'm pleased enough to have your company, Dr. Wallace. Don't get me wrong, but I'm a wee bit puzzled.
Oh, it's a family thing. Sir Robert was my tutor. I suppose you could say my mentor at one time, and I couldn't really refuse his widow. I'm happy just to watch, but she'd never have forgiven me if I refused.
Well, you can keep an eye on me. Make sure I'm not substituting any vital organs. Well, there isn't a mark on them. So we'll know nothing until we've done a proper analysis. This is D.S. Norton, by the way, CID.
Well, I seem to meet most policemen looking across a cadaver, but I'm pleased just the same. It's a grim business we're in, Sergeant.
I'm used to it, sir.
Do you happen to know who signed the certificate?
I think it was his GP, sir, Dr. Traynor.
Aye, Traynor apparently found him in a coma, with his young man having little hysterics in the toilet.
Sir, that wouldn't be nail varnish by any chance.
It is indeed. And coral blush, if I'm any judge. Quite fetching, really. Though I don't imagine Sir Robert would have approved.
No, nor his mother. Sergeant, I presume you'll be interviewing this fellow Davidson again. Would you have any objections to my joining you?
No, none at all, sir. I'd be glad to have you there. You might help to calm him down a bit. We've taken a statement from him, of course, but I'll be visiting him again as soon as we've got the post-mortem results.
Good. I'd appreciate that.
Well, I'll get the stomach contents up to the lab for analysis. We'll see what's what then.
How long do your people normally take?
Well, it depends. What's your record in Sterling?
I thought your father would have been in by now, or at least have phoned.
You know, I'm not unsympathetic. Actually, I feel terrible about the way I spoke to her when she was here. Well, I don't see why Dad has to get involved in what's surely Glasgow business.
She just wants to get at the truth, that's all. And she trusts your father. God knows I wouldn't like to be in her shoes, a dreadful affair altogether. I don't know. I just don't understand what gets into men like that.
I don't think anything gets into them. It's just the way that some people are made.
Well, it's disgusting. I don't even want to think about it. Oh, that'll be your father now.
Dr. Wallace's residence? Oh, it's you, Doctor.
Ah.
Do you want to speak to Mrs. Wallace? Oh, I see. I see. Right. I'll pass that on. Goodbye.
That's the doctor, ma'am, just to say he's been delayed.
Oh.
And he might not get in until late. And not to hold dinner for him. He'll get something outside.
If he remembers. Right, thank you, Mrs. Hamilton.
Very good, ma'am.
No rest for the wicked, eh?
Barbara, I'm sure that should be weary.
Sorry?
No rest for the weary.
Mr. Davidson, I'll go straight to the point. I have to inform you that Ronald Archer died of poisoning. That's now been established beyond any doubt. And there's a strong possibility that someone could be charged with his murder.
You mean me, don't you?
Do you happen to know if Mr. Archer was in the habit of taking pills of any kind?
Are you joking?
Just answer the question.
He took anything he could get. Anything that splashed or rattled.
Mr. Davidson, you don't seem too surprised. Or too upset either. When the constable was called here on Saturday, he said he found you in a state of hysterics, kneeling on the bathroom floor.
Yes. Well, I've shed all my tears.
Tears of sorrow, of course. Mr. Davidson, it's my understanding that you're the only beneficiary named in Ronald Archer's will. That, among other things, he's left you this house.
Oh, yes. Motive. Opportunity.
This is not some sort of a game, son.
If he's left me the house, then I think I deserve it.
What do you mean?
For putting up with him. For giving him
Yes?
what he'd never had.
Mr. Davidson, among the pills you say Mr. Archer took, were any of them barbiturates? Sleeping pills?
I wouldn't know. Red, white, blue. Flags of all nations, frankly.
Can you think of any reason why he took these things? Any reason why he might take an overdose, for instance?
Well?
I can't say.
Or won't say. Mr. Davidson, I'm afraid I'll have to search the house, and I'll be obliged if you'd stay here while the constables are going about their work.
That's all right. I was staying in anyway.
I don't see anything here, Sarge. Nothing that looks particularly toxic. A lot of skin creams, shampoo, nail varnish remover.
Aye, we just don't know how the other half lives, do we? I doubt if we'll find anything, to be honest. He's had plenty of time to get rid of it.
Aye, and he's a cool enough customer. At least he is now.
How do you mean?
Sarge?
You say he is now? It wasn't you that discovered it, was it? On Saturday night?
Oh, aye, it was. The desk sergeant took the call, I think. Anyway, we were round here pretty sharp, and Davison was just sitting here. His head about halfway down the toilet, having hysterics. I was a different person, I'll tell you, Sarge.
Did he make the call?
Davison? I don't think so. I don't know who did, but he looked very surprised when we stepped in. Sarge, what exactly are we looking for?
Some sort of sleeping pills, I think. At least, that's Dr. Kennedy's best guess. Enough barbiturate in him to down a horse.
So it'll be a wee bottle?
Aye. Tell me something. What do you know about plumbing?
Huh?
I think I should have asked Mrs. Hamilton to put out something more festive than coffee. This must be the first time we've had a meal together in weeks. You're not going out again, Barbara, are you?
No, I'm having an early night. Dr. Ibbotson's going to a conference in Glasgow tomorrow, and she's leaving me in charge.
Oh, really?
Well, don't look so alarmed, Dad. It's just for the morning.
I'm not alarmed. I'm sure you'll cope perfectly well.
Anyway, I'll have Mrs. Gillespie to keep me right.
Aye, when in doubt, ask the midwife, as Sir Robert always used to say.
What? Well, you're joking, surely.
Oh, aye. But I had you going for a minute.
I suppose that case is cleared up now. Have you spoken to Gwen Archer yet?
Briefly. I spared her the more colourful details, but her son was poisoned all right.
Oh, in what way?
The Glasgow pathologist found about 30 grains of veronal in his stomach, and a very sharp detective found an empty pill bottle in the toilet outflow.
David, do you think you could spare me the more colourful details?
Aye, sorry. Anyway, the label was still intact, a prescription for Hypnogen sleeping pills. I understand he's traced it back to Davidson's GP.
So his boyfriend murdered him. The whole thing's disgusting. Honestly, I just can't imagine how these people live.
It was a very strange place, I'll tell you. Dressing table like the cosmetics counter in Boots. Wardrobe practically bulging with outsized women's dresses. Size 11 high-heeled shoes.
Good God. And what's this Davidson creature like?
Surprisingly ordinary. You'd walk past him in the street.
A human being, Mother.
I think the outrageous stuff was basically Ronald's.
Well, he was never like that at home. I remember him as such a quiet, well-mannered boy. Gwen must be about out of her mind.
Well, quite frankly, I think Ronald must have been going out of his mind in that family. I should imagine he just about exploded after his father died.
Well, it's a tragic business, and that creature deserves all he gets. I take it he's been charged?
No, not so far. It's actually quite difficult to prove he administered the poison. Theoretically, it could be suicide.
And don't they ask who stands to benefit in these cases? Why would Ronald Archer commit suicide?
Mother, the way he lived. Oh, you've only got to listen to yourself. People's attitudes to homosexuals. I should think I'd feel suicidal in their place.
Barbara?
Oh, relax, Mum, for heaven's sake.
You're right enough, I suppose. The police case isn't watertight anyway, and I think their ace card has to be motive. Davidson certainly might have thought the house, and the money, of course, was worth killing for. The trouble with poisoning is there's no smoking gun. You never catch the poisoner red-handed, and you can't always prove who administered it. Beyond a reasonable doubt, anyway. The odd thing here, though, is that the police walked in on Davidson in the bathroom. They'd been called out, an emergency call, and they found him kneeling on the floor.
Presumably making sure the bottle had been flushed away.
Aye. His own prescription bottle, moreover.
Well, if that's not red-handed... Oh, David, that'll be the fiscal. Oh, my God. He phoned just before you came in.
What?
Honestly, it went clean out of my head. It's a young girl at St. Ninian's. The address will be by the phone.
Look, tell him I'm on my way. I'll be there in 5 minutes.
Dad, do you mind if I come with you?
I thought you were having an early night.
Oh, no, that's gone clean out of my head.
Oh, women.
This is my daughter. She's my win, too. What the hell do you expect with 2 hours turn the bloody street?
Ah, well, you bloody drove her to it. She'd nae life.
Oh, and she'd have had one with that scum of the earth. This is his doing. You wait and see. He's at the back of this. That's just what I've told the police. Couldn't face up to his responsibilities, could he? Shit, this I don't get it. Why do you think he's cleared off, eh?
I think we'd better have the door shut, Mr. Curran.
I know, sir. It's not stopped since I got here. I mean, God knows, shock does terrible things to people, but I've never heard anything like it.
You've met my daughter, Barbara.
Oh, yes, sir. Hello again.
Hi.
So, what's the story?
Well, this is their daughter, Isabel. Apparently she collapsed in the street in Stirling. Somebody managed to get her into a taxi, and by the time it arrived here, she was unconscious, possibly even dead.
Oh, she's pregnant, isn't she? What, about 4 months?
At least that. Aye, Barbara. Oh, if you want to help, you could start checking the temperatures. Get a reading for the ambient first.
All right.
Time of death's probably, as you say, Mr. Curran, in the taxi.
I've spoken to the driver. He says a young woman hailed him in King Street. Looked like a shop girl. Gave him the address and helped Miss McKinnon into the cab. He thought maybe she'd just come over a bit faint in the shops, too long on her feet or whatever.
God, it's a tragic enough business. A good-looking young girl, all her life before her.
Dad?
Hmm?
What's that smell? It's like dry cleaning fluid or something.
Mm-hmm. So it is.
I wouldn't want to give it too much credence. They're pretty hysterical just now, but... Well, the father thinks the boyfriend's to blame. Shotgun wedding. He reckons he'd have stopped at nothing to get out of it.
Surely not murder.
Who knows? Anyway, we've tried all his known haunts. Seems he's the local fire-eater. Not a sign of him. Might have done a bunk.
Well, there's not much we can do here, apart from establishing time of death. If you'll arrange to deliver the body to Stirling Royal, Mr. Curran, I'll take it from there.
Right, sir. And we've obviously got to trace this back to King Street and our good Samaritan.
Miss Wallace! Miss Wallace! Oh, God, I thought you'd never come. Oh, my God.
Betty, calm down, please. What's the matter?
Mrs. Gillespie sent a note. One of her boys. He says she's in bed with the flu and she can't come in this morning. And there's a woman just walked in. Oh, my God, there's blood everywhere. She's tried to abort herself. Dr. Robertson's in Glasgow and there's nobody here.
Where is she?
She's in the waiting room. I got her up onto a couch, but... God, she's white as a sheet and it's still coming. She just walked in off the street.
What about the instruments? Is anything sterile?
I've just started. Dr. Robertson said it'd be a quiet day.
All right. Now listen, Betty. What's her name?
Grace something, I didn't catch it.
Right, go in and talk to Grace. Tell her she'll be fine. Tell her the doctor's here. Oh, God, I wish it were true. Tell her I'm coming straight in to see her. I'll be in the minute I scrub up. And we better not move her.
I put clean sheets on the couch.
Good. Look, you're doing well. Just talk to her. And keep her calm. And Betty, for God's sake, smile.
Aye, it's a sorry business. She was a fine-looking girl. Would have been a good, healthy baby, too, with any luck.
I don't think she'd much of that, judging by that family of hers. You know the boyfriend's done a bunk.
Really?
Aye. He digs in Goosecroft Road. Handy for the bus station. Apparently cleared his room out late Friday. Left owing some back rent. I'm not sure if he even knows she's dead.
Mm-hmm. He might have been the scum of the earth, but I doubt if he's a suspect.
To be honest, sir, I didn't think it was likely. I mean, getting into a taxi and all that, it'd need to be poison, wouldn't it? And I don't think that would be his style somehow.
No, true enough. So, what about suicide, Mr. Curran?
Well, the place is wrong again, isn't it? Middle of King Street, early closing.
That could be motive, though. Yes. 4 months pregnant, a shotgun wedding lined up, boyfriend skips town.
I know, sir, but she doesn't look the type, does she?
How do you mean?
Well, the peroxide hair. It's a bit straggly, but it's obviously the latest fashion. And the way she was dressed. Or half-dressed, maybe. No disrespect to the girl, but she's what my mother would call a fast piece.
And is forever warning you about, I suppose?
Oh, no.
Well, I'm not convinced by either suicide or murder. She's been poisoned, all right. Carbon tetrachloride, I'd say. But there's no trace in her stomach, so she didn't ingest it.
Carbon tetrachloride?
It's used as a solvent for a variety of purposes. It's also prescribed as a treatment for hookworms. And I think it was tried out as an anaesthetic at one time, but it's pretty toxic stuff.
Didn't your daughter mention that, sir? The smell in the house, like dry cleaning. And that's what killed her.
Well, you could put it that way. Actually, this lady had some glandular problems. If you look in her mouth. See? No. Her tonsils are really quite enlarged.
Oh, right.
I think death was probably caused by carbon tetrachloride vapour, however that was administered, and constricted breathing. The condition's called status lymphaticus, one of the reasons people sometimes don't come out of anaesthesia. What are you thinking, Mr. Curran?
Well, I'm just wondering, sir, do you think it's possible the McKinnon girl could have had an illegal operation?
With an anaesthetic you can buy in any ironmonger's.
A bit far-fetched?
Ooh, I've heard further. You're still looking for your good Samaritan.
Combing the streets, sir, and it's getting more urgent.
And I'm grateful to him. I'm sure the Glasgow pathologist would have done his job, but I'll rest easier now that David's confirmed it. Let's just hope that Davidson creature gets what he deserves.
Gwen, I don't know that they can prove anything yet. That'll be up to the court. And from what David says, the police don't have a strong case.
Oh, I know. But what reason would Ronald have had to take his own life? To tell you the truth, if he was that way... Oh, I've had to face a few unpleasant things, Margaret. If he'd always been like that, well, he might have wanted to... Margaret, if he was going to take his own life, he would have done it while Robert was alive. You know what they say. People commit suicide in order to hurt somebody. It's not something I care to admit, but it's the truth. Whereas this Davidson... Well, he must have had his eye on Ronald from the start. That's my belief. Worm his way into his confidence, corrupt him. Yes, I wouldn't be at all surprised. And then, when he's made sure of the house and the money, get rid of him. Well, I only hope they hang him. The sooner the better. You're not expecting David home this afternoon?
No, I'm not, Gwen. He's involved in a case in St Ninians. I'll be lucky to see him this side of 10 o'clock. Barbara's in Edinburgh. She should have been home by now, but I'm not holding my breath. Gwen, if you'd like to stay on for dinner, you'll be very welcome. It's no fun eating by myself.
No. Thanks, Margaret. I really hoped I might catch David. I know his part in the case is over, and I'm grateful for what he's done, but I wondered if he'd just have a word with the detective in charge. He must have access to him, and I want to know how the police are dealing with this. As far as I understand, they haven't even charged Davidson yet, and that's scandalous, frankly.
It is, I agree. I'll speak to David when he comes in.
Thanks. You know, this is all about guilt. Davidson's, of course, but there's mine as well. And Robert's. Maybe if we hadn't been so hard on Ronald. Well, we'll never know, will we?
I don't know what else you could have done, Barbara. You did all the right things. Ergometrine doesn't always work, and it wouldn't have made any difference if I'd been here or Mrs. Gillespie. I'm not just saying that to ease my own conscience. Believe me.
I just felt so helpless.
Sometimes we are. You've got to learn that. At least you got the abortionist's name. Usually they'll do anything to protect them. I don't know why. I think they feel closer to them than to people like us. You know, some old handy woman, as they call them, up the next street. Did she say how it had been done?
Well, she thought a knitting needle or crochet hook or something like that. And she could smell disinfectant.
Yes, that's not uncommon. I've heard worse. Some of these women are highly prized, you know, for having graveyard luck.
What's that?
Well, basically, it's the trick of managing to lose the child while saving the mother. Anyway, I think your Granny Irvin just ran out of luck. We'll inform the police tomorrow morning. Come on. Try and put it to the back of your mind. It's not easy, I know. It happens to all of us regularly. That's why I keep this in here. Medicinal purposes. Well, therapeutic. Here, put this down in one. It'll test your cough reflexes. Good. The second one's always easier. Same as birth.
Thanks.
Feeling better?
A bit. You know, Mary, I think it's just this week that's getting to me. That poor girl in St Ninians, an unmarried mother again. They aren't your case, the one my father got roped into. They were homosexuals, so they were capable of anything. That's the reasoning.
Oh, yes. Compared with that kind of depravity, murder's almost decent.
You didn't ever meet Sir Robert, did you?
No. I've felt his influence, though. His ghost still walks the Edinburgh Royal, rattles its chains whenever it sees a woman in a white coat. Is that a smile? Here, a top-up.
Oh,
What happened to the other girl?
I don't know. Dad's baffled. Apparently, she was helped into a taxi in the middle of Stirling and died on the way home. Carbon tetrachloride poisoning.
Really?
She'd been in town doing last-minute shopping for her wedding. The boyfriend was already doing a bunk by all accounts. Terrible. A bad week for relationships, eh?
Is there ever a good one? Carbon tetrachloride. Was she collecting her dry cleaning by any chance?
That's what came into my mind. You could smell it from her clothes. No. Hold on.
Barbara?
Not her clothes. It wasn't her clothes. And I've just remembered where else I've smelled that. Mary, can I make a phone call? No. No, I'll wait. I'll wait until tomorrow.
I think you better. Do you know it's after 2 in the morning?
Oh, God.
To tell you the truth, sir, we're reluctant to charge him. The chief doesn't think we can make it stick, for all the reasons you know already. I can well understand his mother's concern. It must be galling to think Davidson might walk away with the house and everything. But if it won't run in court...
Maybe I'm guessing, but I don't think you're too concerned, Sergeant. Don't take that the wrong way. But I get the feeling you wouldn't see a miscarriage of justice here. Do you think it was suicide?
Well, it's just instinct, I suppose. But we've been able to confirm Davidson's story about Archer's drug habits. What was it he said? If it splashed or rattled? And this predates his acquaintance with Davidson. By the sound of it, he was raiding his father's medical bag when he was barely out of his teens. No doubt in between raiding his mother's wardrobe.
Aye, a pretty tormented life. I think the defence could build a case on that. Habitual drug user, unstable personality, deliberate or accidental overdose.
I think so. And probably as strong a case as we'd have on motive.
Indeed. The fact that the Hypnogen prescription was made out to Davidson's really neither here nor there. I presume you've not made any more headway with him? He sounded like a pretty cool customer.
Oh, I've lost count of the interviews. You know, sir, I hope you won't take this the wrong way, but I'm getting to quite like him. And if I was to hazard a guess, I don't think he's the murder type.
How do you mean?
Well, I know we're all supposed to be capable and so on, but with some people, you get the sense of a wee voice at the back of their minds that's always in control.
And you think Davidson hears that wee voice?
If it exists, sir, yes. I'm also pretty certain he's hiding something, even if it's not guilt.
Mind you, given the kind of life he leads, it'd be odd if he wasn't hiding something. That's not what you mean, though, is it?
No, sir. There's one other strange thing about this case, and that's the emergency call. The desk sergeant that took it says it was a woman's voice. She wouldn't give her name, just reported it from a public call box, apparently. She said something about a serious accident, a man was dying, possibly dead, then just hung up.
How do you mean, possibly dead? Was the desk sergeant not sure?
No, that's what she said.
And you've no idea who she was?
No, sir. We've been round all the neighbours, everybody we can think of, but no luck.
And you think that's what Davidson's hiding?
Maybe.
You know, Sergeant, I think I'd charge him.
With murder? It won't stick.
No, but it might loosen his tongue.
I don't think I've seen you in here before, Miss... Did you have an appointment?
It's Wallace. No, I didn't make an appointment. I thought I'd just come in on spec. I've been in here before, but that was a while ago. I was with my mother, I think.
Oh, well, I wouldn't remember anyway. I've only been here a year.
Oh.
What was it you wanted?
Well, something urgent's come up, a last-minute invitation, and I was really hoping I could get a perm. Oh, I know I should have made an appointment, but it was last minute, as I say. I see you do a full perm for 10 and 6. The deluxe. It would need to be that, I think. It's a very special occasion.
Well, I'm not sure if Madame Celine's available. She might be fully booked.
Is there no one else?
No, she does all the perms. She's very good. She does a beautiful job, but she's always in demand. She's with a customer just now. I could ask her. See what she says.
If you would, please.
Miss Wallace? I'm sorry. I don't usually accept anyone without an appointment.
Oh, it is very urgent. A wedding invitation that got held up in the post.
Yes, Jenny said it was a special occasion. Unfortunately, we are terribly busy and the full perm will be at least 2 hours. I couldn't take you before 11 o'clock, I'm afraid.
Well, I wouldn't mind waiting. I've heard so many people recommending you. My mother comes here regularly and she was telling Lady Archer just the other day she wouldn't dream of going anywhere else. I honestly don't mind waiting, if you can fit me in.
Oh, well. All right. I'll tell Jenny to bring you a cup of coffee.
Oh, that would be lovely. Thank you so much.
Well, Sergeant Norton. I wasn't expecting you at this hour. What can I do for you?
Charles Davidson?
I'm sorry. Are you asking me? I should think you recognise me by now.
Charles Davidson, I'm arresting you on suspicion of the murder of Ronald Archer. You don't have to say anything, but I must warn you that anything you do say may be given in evidence.
Oh, yes, and I suppose you'll be obliged if I'd accompany you to the station, sir. Really, this is a farce.
I think you'd better find a solicitor, sir, if you haven't got one. Unless there's anything else you want to tell me.
Meaning what? I'll phone my solicitor, if you don't mind.
Well, you can do that from the station. You'd better bring a coat.
Charlie, who is it?
It's nothing, Beth. Beth, just stay where you are.
Charlie, what's going on?
And I was sure you must be French, from hearing my mother talk about you. I thought that was really glamorous. A French salon in the middle of Stirling.
No, I trained in London, in a salon in Regent Street. It was very grand. A long time ago. All the assistants had to have French names. The clientele demanded it, so we were told. We had a Colette, and a Françoise, and a Marianne. I was Céline. Mademoiselle Céline in those days, of course. And I just revived the name when I opened up this place.
Oh, so you haven't been here long? Well, I thought you must have been here ages. You look so well established.
About 5 or 6 years. My husband wanted to get out of London. He'd always loved Scotland. Used to play golf every season at Gleneagles. Salmon fishing, hill walking. Unfortunately, he wasn't spared to enjoy his retirement. And I was left with nothing to do. All on my own, all day in a big house. So I decided to go back to my old profession and start my own business.
Which is obviously thriving.
Well, good wine needs no bush, as they say. We worked like slaves in London, but we were well trained. Not like most of the girls nowadays. Oh, we have some promising young people here, don't misunderstand me. Jenny's very reliable, for one. But I can't really trust them with the more difficult cuts.
And the perms, of course.
Oh, indeed. Right, now. I don't think you want more than that off.
No.
I've layered it at the back, as you can see. Give it the right body shape before we start the perm.
Well, that's lovely.
Right. A good thorough shampooing now. Take all the grease out. No, I must say your hair's not too bad in that respect. And that's a blessing compared with some.
Well, I've never thought of my hair as a blessing, but I'll take the word of an expert.
Yes, I made the call. Charlie wouldn't let me do it from the house. Practically flung me out. He didn't want me to get involved.
And where was Ronald Archer at this time?
He was sitting in the living room, or sprawled rather, in the big armchair beside the fire. I'm sure he was already dead. Anyway, Charlie was going frantic, trying to revive him. I went to pick up the phone. and he started shouting at me, so I ran out to the call box on Highbury Road, just round the corner.
And what time was this?
It'd be about 11 o'clock.
And that was how long after you discovered the body?
Just after. It couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. We'd been out at the theatre, and we took a taxi back to the house.
Which theatre?
The King's. It was Shaw's Arms and the Man. Charlie'll have the ticket stubs, I'm sure, though I know that doesn't prove anything.
You know how Ronald Archer died, Miss Somerville? Barbiturate poisoning. Sleeping pills, originally prescribed for Charles Davidson. According to the pathologist, he could have been in a coma for quite some time.
And Charlie could have set the whole theatre thing up as an alibi. Is that what you mean?
When did you last see Ronald Archer alive?
Me? Several weeks ago, I should think.
And what about Mr. Davidson?
What do you mean?
When did he last see him alive?
Well, Charlie hadn't seen him for days. He thought he was in London. That's why we went back to the house.
You were avoiding him?
You could put it like that.
Miss Somerville, how much do you know about Mr. Davidson's relationship with the deceased?
Enough.
You know they were involved in homosexual activity.
Sergeant, I know enough.
And what was your relationship with Ronald Archer?
Rival? Daggers drawn? Sergeant, if anybody was going to poison Ronald Archer, it would have been me. But God knows I had ample cause. He was making my life a misery just as he'd done Charlie's.
Oh, I thought Charlie was doing rather well out of him. Substantial West End house, several £1,000s, not to mention bed and board over the last few years.
And you think that can't be a recipe for misery? That's what Ronald got from his own family, his so-called loved ones. Just ponder that, Sergeant.
Miss Somerville, how long have you known Charles Davidson?
About a year.
And can I ask what your relationship with him is?
How much has he told you?
Nothing. Not a damn thing. If you'll pardon the expression. We didn't know you existed until this morning.
Yes. He wanted to keep me out of all this. He had nothing to do with Ronald's death, you know. If you're looking to blame anybody, blame me. I could see it coming. Charlie doesn't know the half of it.
What do you mean?
Sergeant, Charlie and I are getting married. We've been wanting to for months, and the only thing stopping us was Ronald.
Stopping you? In what way?
Oh, threats. Hysterical outbursts.
He threatened Davidson.
As if he would. No, Sergeant, that wasn't Ronald's style. He knew if he threatened Charlie, he'd have defied him, told him to do his worst.
His worst? And what does that mean exactly?
Exactly what he's done. Killed himself.
Can you prove that?
No, of course not. But for the last 3 months, Ronald Archer pestered me incessantly, warning me to keep away from Charlie. He used to phone me at work. Would you believe that? You can ask my boss if you like, or a receptionist. She puts the calls through. I'm a legal secretary. That's where Charlie and I met, when they came into the office to sign some papers in connection with the house. Ronald Archer phoned me almost every day at work, shrieking about what he was going to do if I didn't get out of Charlie's life, out of their life. And Charlie knows nothing of this. Oh, Archer was crafty enough to keep it quiet. He knew he could get to me sooner than Charlie, that I might just walk away rather than see Charlie get hurt. As far as Charlie was concerned, Ronald just didn't like me that much. Well, I cared deeply for Charlie, and if I'd thought for 2 seconds that he had any future with that neurotic swine, I'd have done precisely what Ronald wanted and cleared off. That's the only thing Archer knew. How to manipulate people. That's the one lesson his family taught him. His will be done, and to hell with anybody else's. And killing himself was just one final attempt to get his own way. My only regret is that I didn't trust my own instincts. I did see it coming, yes, but when Archer disappeared, Charlie said they'd had a row and he'd walked out, gone off to London. Well, I thought I'd misread him. You can't always be sure when somebody's bluffing and when the pistol really is loaded.
You've never thought of going into police work, Miss Somerville?
Can I see Charlie now, Sergeant?
So you think they'll drop the charge?
Oh, I'm sure they will. It would have been hard enough to prove anyway, and now that there's a motive for Ronald's suicide, to be honest, that's more persuasive than the idea that Davidson would have murdered him for gain, when he already had everything he wanted.
Except the girl. Gwen won't give up, you know.
Aye, but I don't think she'll get anywhere. Death by misadventure. That's probably the best way for everybody concerned. Ronald's drug-taking was well enough known. That's the least stigma. Just a tragic accident. I'll drive over to Harriet Row tomorrow. Have a word with her.
Evening, Miss Wallace.
Oh, it's Barbara.
My, you're looking very special tonight.
What?
Date? Hamilton. Just thought I'd treat myself. Is my father home yet?
Yes, I'll take your coat. Oh, now, would you like a cup of tea?
Oh, that would be lovely, thanks.
Goodness me. When did you have that done?
Oh, Mother, you're supposed to say I look stunning. Well, what do you think?
It's very fetching. Of course it is. Are we allowed to know who you're trying to fetch?
Some hopes. Well, do you like it?
Yes, it's very nice. Not your usual style, though.
Oh, I didn't know I had a style.
Well, it's lovely to see you taking an interest in your appearance. It's, very attractive, really. Where did you have it done?
Madame Salines, would you believe?
What? Heavens, that's terribly expensive, that place. I haven't been in there since, it must be last Easter.
Yes. 10 and 6 this cost, the full works. Madame Salines' own fair hand. Well, come on, Dad. Is it me, do you think? Good. That's all I needed. So that'll cost you 10 and 6 for Madame Saline and possibly another 5 bob to put it right.
Eh? How come?
My consultant's fee. I've just solved your St. Ninian's case. Isabel McKinnon was helped into a taxi in King Street by a girl in overalls. Madame Saline's famous shampoo just happens to be stiff with carbon tetrachloride.
What?
Oh, yes. I knew I'd smelt it somewhere. And if I hadn't a good pair of lungs, I think I'd be getting carted home in a taxi too. I felt distinctly woozy, I can tell you.
Barbara, carbon tetrachloride's on the poisons register. She's not allowed to put it in shampoo or anything else.
Well, Madame Saline learnt her trade a long time ago in a very posh salon in London. And if it was good enough for them, then it's certainly good enough for the lieges of Stirling. I'm not joking, Dad. I really did feel quite lightheaded.
So you think it's misadventure? 2 in one day?
Sorry?
Ronald Archer.
Oh.
Barbara, did you say anything to this Madame Saline?
Oh, no. I didn't want to prejudice. Oh, have I got it right? The investigation? Oh, but I did mention the shampoo in particular to one of her acolytes. Oh, what an exhilarating experience it was. And she looked just a wee touch uncomfortable. Anyway, Dad, I think D.C. Curran might have a word with a young hairdresser called Jenny. I'm pretty sure that'll be his good Samaritan. And I'll take that 5 bob now if you have it.
Oh, Charlie, thank God.
Oh, Beth. I can't believe it.
They've dropped the charge.
Yes. Oh, I still can't believe it. My God, Beth, that was close. That was dangerous. How you hung on, I'll never know.
Charlie, we had to. We had to hang on. It was the only way. Do you think they would have believed us otherwise?
Oh, God, Beth, I don't know. I just don't know.
No, they wouldn't, Charlie. They wouldn't. But they've got their motive now, and we're free and clear. Think of that, Charlie. It was worth all those phone calls, eh? I mean, really? I could have got the sack.
In Fast and Loose, the part of Mrs. Wallace was played by Jan Moffat, Lady Archer by Eliza Langland, and Barbara by Meg Fraser. Dr. Wallace was played by Martin James, Dr. Kennedy by Karen Falconer, and D.C. Curran by Liam Brennan. Mrs. Hamilton was played by Grace Glover, Davidson by Billy Boyd, and Dr. Ibbotson by Louise Beattie. Madame Celine was played by Maria Miller, Beth by Elaine Ellis, and D.C. Norton by Barry Hunter. Other parts were played by members of the cast.
Dr. Wallace, right away.
Rights and wrongs. Rights and wrongs.
Dr. Wallace, how long have you been practicing medicine?
Approximately 25 years.
25 years. Quarter of a century. And in what capacity?
For the past 12 years, Chief Pathologist for Stirling County.
And prior to that?
Resident Pathologist at Stirling Royal Infirmary, concurrent with a period of time as police surgeon.
You've also worked in general practice, I believe.
Yes, 5 or 6 years.
So, you have an extensive knowledge and experience of a number of fields, including the day-to-day practice of medicine. Is there any doubt in your mind concerning the cause of death of the child Mary Ann Martin?
No.
No? Dr. Wallace, it's my understanding that pathologists in general shun certainty like the plague. And what makes you so certain in this case?
Mary Ann Martin died of diphtheria. The presence of the diphtheria bacillus in the child's throat was easily verified, and in my opinion caused the symptoms which led to her death.
Dr. Wallace, perhaps you could explain in layman's terms something of the nature of the disease.
Of course. The diphtheria bacillus is what is known as site-specific. That is, it remains in the throat or wherever inflammation first occurs and gives out a potent toxin, which circulates in the body. And if the disease is untreated, commonly causes death.
If the disease is untreated, yes. But the disease can be treated, isn't that so?
Indeed. If diphtheria is diagnosed in time, the patient can be inoculated with an antitoxin, which improves their chances quite significantly.
And would such treatment have improved Mary Ann Martin's chances, do you think?
Yes, I'm sure it would.
If her illness had been correctly diagnosed, of course. Dr. Wallace, can you think of any reason why Mary Ann Martin's diphtheria was not correctly diagnosed?
I would rather not speculate.
Let me put the question another way. From the symptoms being exhibited by the child, how might a competent physician have diagnosed diphtheria?
Mary Ann Martin's early symptoms might have been produced by a number of causes. That's very often the case. But diphtheria is also characterized by the formation of a whitish false membrane at the back of the throat, and a simple swab is generally enough to confirm the presence of the diphtheria bacillus.
And you would have taken a throat swab?
Certainly. There's been something of a resurgence of diphtheria in the Stirling area this summer, and it would be an obvious precaution.
An obvious precaution. A simple throat swab. Dr. Wallace, you choose your words with care, but there's surely no denying their implications. Wouldn't any competent physician, any concerned general practitioner have done precisely that?
I would hope so.
And yet Dr. Considine not only failed to diagnose Mary Ann Martin's diphtheria, he appears to have blanked the disease completely from his mind. Despite the fact, as we heard from an earlier witness, that children in Mary Ann Martin's primary school and the surrounding area were, and I quote, dropping like flies. Now, Dr. Wallace, the medicine prescribed for Mary Ann by Dr. Considine, on his own admission, was a simple linctus, a herbal cough syrup. In your professional opinion, what effect would that be likely to have on the progress of the disease?
It might afford some temporary relief of the symptoms, but nothing more than that.
No effect?
No.
Useless. Worse than useless, indeed, since it prevented Mary Ann Martin from receiving proper treatment. Treatment that might have saved her life. Dr. Wallace, are you aware that the dead child's parents are practicing Christian scientists?
Yes.
And that Christian scientists are opposed to any form of medical treatment?
I believe that is so.
Dr. Wallace, in your opinion, is it possible that Dr. Considine's so-called misdiagnosis, his hopelessly inadequate response to Mary Ann's plight, might even have had the approval of the child's mother and father? That they might knowingly have allowed her to die to uphold a principle? Is it possible?
I'm sorry, I don't believe I'm permitted to answer that.
Indeed you are not, Dr. Wallace. And Mr. Lorimer ought to know that.
I'm sorry, Your Honour. Perhaps if I rephrase the question?
You may save your breath, Mr. Lorimer. And I find your choice of words quite extraordinary. Approval indeed.
Well, thank you, Dr. Wallace. You may stand up.
I just can't imagine any mother letting that happen.
Well, it's not the worst I've experienced.
I mean, a normal, loving mother. It's almost inconceivable.
That's what the jury think. You could see it on their faces when she was being discussed. They think she's suffered enough, and that might save Considine as well.
You say they're Christian scientists. I thought they didn't bother with doctors.
Not as far as I know they don't. And that's something that puzzles me.
You mean that this Dr. Considine was called in at all?
Aye. Well, there have been a few cases not unlike this, but it's usually the parents in the dock, for obvious reasons. Apparently, it was Mrs. Martin's mother that reported it, and the defence are making an issue out of her dislike for her daughter's husband. Juries might not know much about Christian Science, but they know mothers-in-law.
Maybe they should try seeing her as a grandmother. Have the Martins any other children?
They've another 3, I think, all under the age of 7. This is part of the defence case as well. The other children have had just about everything that's going. Mumps, croup, whooping cough.
Oh, no.
And they've recovered without any help from the medical profession. Thanks very much.
God help the wee souls.
Well, that's just the point. That's what they believe.
So who called Considine in?
I don't know. Possibly the mother, Mrs. Martin.
Really?
Breaking ranks with the faithful. Yes, it's a puzzle.
And you're in court again tomorrow?
Well, I think the medical testimony's over, unless the defence want to have a go. Their own expert managed to blind the jury with non-science, I gather.
As distinct from nonsense?
Same thing. According to Dr. McAllister, diagnosis is a bit like pinning the tail on a donkey. So, the jury now think Considine was just unlucky. Anyway, you've got enough on your plate tomorrow.
Oh, God.
First day at the GRI, eh?
Oh, I've been trying to talk her into an early night, so she'll be well rested. But it's a waste of time.
I wouldn't be able to sleep anyway. I'm too excited.
In some ways, it's a pity you've got to travel through to Glasgow. But Randolph's a first-rate clinician. He'll give you a hard time. His students are terrified of him. But he's worth listening to.
As long as he's fair. I can't ask more than that. The Edinburgh Royal hasn't changed since Professor Archer's time. They still don't want women on the wards. Unless they're nurses.
Oh, Randolph has his prejudices as well. Doesn't like surgeons. Oh, I've heard he tells students all they need for surgery is to be a good dressmaker.
Really? There's more than one prejudice lurking in there. Anyway, Mary Ibbotson recommended him, and I think it was probably her letter too that got me accepted. And I just hope I don't let her down.
I'm sure you won't. Though I must say I'm relieved you're out of that clinic. She couldn't have picked a worse part of Edinburgh, frankly.
Mum, that's the whole point. Oh, didn't somebody just say that? Anyway, the Royal Infirmary is not exactly in a garden suburb, you know. And I'll have to walk to Buchanan Street Station, maybe even in the dark.
Oh, well, I'm sure you'll find some nice young man to escort you.
Oh, never misses a trick, does she?
Mrs. Telfer, counsel for the panel has suggested that your motive in reporting this matter to the police had nothing to do with your concern for your grandchild and everything
Grandchildren.
I'm sorry?
Grandchildren. There's 3 Waynes still in that house.
Yes, yes, of course. Mrs. Telfer, it's been suggested that you were motivated by hatred of your son-in-law. Now, is that true? Do you hate John Martin?
After what happened to Mary Ann?
Yes, I do. God forgive me.
But before that, what was your relationship with your son-in-law?
I didn't like him. I've never liked him.
Why not?
Because of what he's done to my Ruth. My daughter's got no life.
No life, Mrs. Telfer. Now, perhaps you could explain what you mean by that.
He's drained the life out of her. She's got no mind of her own, no spirit.
Mrs. Telfer, there are a number of people, some of them in this court, who would say that your daughter had no spirit until she met John Martin. That until she embraced his Christian Science beliefs, her soul was dead within her. What would you say to that?
Oh, I'd ask them what kind of spirit it takes to watch your own child suffering and do nothing. What kind of mother could do that?
And Mary Ann wasn't the first of your grandchildren to suffer in this way, was she?
No. No, we, John and Sarah, have had mumps, both of them. And Mary Ann had whooping cough at the beginning of the year.
And did they receive any medical attention?
No, not a damn thing.
Mrs. Telfer.
I'm sorry, Your Honour.
Whooping cough and mumps. Now, these can be very painful and distressing. You're sure that's what the children had?
I've brought up 6 of my own. They had everything under the sun. And a doctor to attend them. I know what I'm talking about.
But as the counsel for the panel pointed out, your grandchildren recovered from these illnesses and are none the worse for it. Your daughter and son-in-law would presumably say it was God's will, that God granted them the strength to overcome the disease.
Oh, aye. They'd say that, all right. All that laying on of hands and praying. Oh, it's got to do some good, hasn't it? Well, I never saw it all the time those Waynes suffered. The whooping cough nearly finished Mary Ann in January. She was always delicate. And when she took ill again, I knew it was diphtheria. No matter what that damn quack said.
Mrs. Telfer, kindly moderate your language.
I'm sorry, Your Honour.
Well, Mrs. Telfer, I take it you were referring in that last remark to the panel, Dr. Considine. I'm not sure I understand why he was called to attend Mary Ann in the first place if your daughter and son-in-law didn't believe in doctors.
Oh, don't ask me what they believe. All I know is I told Ruth Mary Ann had diphtheria, and if she didn't want the Wayne to die, she'd need to get a doctor, and never mind what he said.
He being your son-in-law, John Martin.
Ah, that's right.
And did she agree?
Oh, she did. She was hysterical. She knew herself how close Mary Ann had been with the whooping cough. Mothers know these things.
So how did she come to call in Dr. Considine?
She didn't. It was him that called Considine in.
Your daughter told her husband?
She told him if he didn't agree to a doctor this time, she was leaving him.
That took some courage, I would imagine.
She was desperate. And somewhere there was a shred of spirit left in her. A bit of the daughter I gave birth to. It didn't do any good, though. Not with him. Not with that damned charlatan.
Mrs. Telfer.
Well, it's the truth. He's not fit to dress cats. Oh. He shouldn't have been allowed near that poor wee soul.
Mrs. Telfer, you've had your last warning.
I told her monies a time.
Mr. Lorimer,
I
you
told
can
her.
stand down your
Get
witness.
her, well, you
and I'll
can.
adjourn this hearing until 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Right, gentlemen, and Miss Wallace, of course. I think you've had enough time now. Abdominal pain, acute constipation, jaundiced appearance. Mr. Pritchard, what have you gleaned from the patient? How did you find him?
I'm sorry?
Turned back the sheet and there he was, I suppose. I mean, what sort of mood was he in? How did he react to all your prodding and poking?
Not too well, sir.
Bit uncooperative? Yes, I should think he was. You should remember you're pressing tender organs, not palpating melons. I understand you want to be a surgeon, Mr. Pritchard.
Yes, sir.
Just as well. At least your patients will be anaesthetised. Mr. McDade, can you shed any light here?
Well, sir, the patient's appetite's very poor, he says, and the abdomen's quite rigid. He's been suffering from headaches and a general soreness in the joints. And he said he'd been getting tired very easily at work. Oh, and a sort of metallic taste in his mouth.
You seem to have squeezed a bit more out of him. You might tell Mr. Pritchard your secret.
I said I'd try and smuggle him in a beer.
Resourceful enough, if unethical. Mr. O'Donnell, the next move?
Well, sir, I think I'd want urine and stool samples. See what's going on internally.
All right. And if I tell you that the patient is passing blood, there's also protein in the urine, some granular casts, increased platelets, reticulocytes about twice the normal percentage, what would you say? You'd say he's pretty sick, wouldn't you? Did anyone notice a slight tremor? Mr. McDade, maybe it was in anticipation of that beer of yours. Mr. O'Donnell, anything to add?
I think I'd want an x-ray of the abdomen, sir.
Oh, really? All that soft tissue? Now, why would you do that? A shot in the dark. You're not wrong, Mr. O'Donnell, but it does help if you have even a ghost of an idea what you're looking for. Anybody? Miss Wallace, last but not least, what might Mr. O'Donnell be looking for on his X-ray picture?
Lead?
Yes. That's absolutely right. Radiopaque particles of lead. Tell me, Miss Wallace, did you examine the patient's gums?
No, sir, I wasn't able to.
Kept his teeth clamped shut, yes, I know. But what would you expect to find?
Well, lead lines, possibly. A brownish line along the gums?
Indeed. Have you ever seen it?
No, sir.
But you read a lot, eh? So tell me, Miss Wallace, what made you think of lead?
Well, he is a painter by trade, so...
You asked him what he did for a living?
Well, yes, sir. He works in the paint shop at John Brown's. Or at least he did. He's worked there the past 12 years on all the big ships, so he says.
Well, Miss Wallace. Miss Wallace, your diagnosis is absolutely spot on. Painter's colic, as it's vulgarly termed. Makes it sound like teething troubles, Chronic lead poisoning. Well done, Miss Wallace. And take note, the rest of you. Talk to your patient. Listen to what he's got to say. And that was a dismal showing, Mr. Pritchard. I expect better from my students, even if they do want to be dressmakers.
Aye, well, some of us have got a head start.
Hey, O'Donnell, where are you going? Oh, good God, man, we're not sitting with her, little Miss Smarty Pants.
You're wasting your time anyway. She's already got her book out.
Oh, aye, reads a lot, that's right. Well, cut it out. It'll be Gleister's toxicology. Watch out she doesn't poison you.
Paddy, there's a table up the back. Are you coming?
Suit yourself.
Hi. Mind if I sit here?
It's a free country, so they say.
Thanks. Carry on reading if you want. The name's Patrick, by the way. My God, that is Gleister you're reading, isn't it? Should I have ordered an emetic?
Oh, I'm sorry. The name's Barbara.
Oh, I know. Father, the distinguished pathologist and all that. Your fame's run ahead of you.
Is that so?
I think that's partly why those two are so... Well, you know what I mean.
You said partly. Well, what does that mean? What's the other part?
Well, you were showing off a wee bit.
Rubbish! How was I showing off?
Maybe not showing off, but you look pleased with yourself.
Oh, damn it, of course I was. Who wouldn't be? It's because I'm a woman, isn't it? I'm expected to apologise for being right. Well, I got here under my own steam. I've had to endure enough prejudice, and I'm apologising to nobody. Maybe you should join your chums.
I'm sorry. Look, I know how you feel.
Do you? I don't see you wearing a skirt.
You think I don't know about prejudice? You know how long it took me to get into the medical faculty? Try being the son of a bog Irish immigrant whose ancestors haven't been doctors back to the time of Galen.
Could be worse.
You think so?
He could have been his daughter.
Isn't it the case, Mr. Martin, that your wife has refused to speak on Dr. Considine's behalf? That she will no longer support you in this cause?
My wife's a sick woman.
Yes, she has lost a child. I would imagine so. She must be suffering very badly. As your daughter Mary Ann also suffered. Mr. Martin, I think we would all recognise a distinction between pain which can be relieved and that which cannot. Your wife's pain, unfortunately, is of the latter kind, but your daughter's was of the former. Mary Ann could have been relieved of her pain had her illness been correctly diagnosed. Would you accept that?
May I be allowed to speak?
Go on.
Mr. Lorimer, I don't accept your views on suffering in the first place. You don't understand our beliefs. We don't make any distinction between these things, not in the way you suggest. Christian Scientists believe that all human suffering, whatever its nature, comes from our blindness to the reality of Christ's love. Diagnosis is irrelevant because the true sickness is spiritual, not physical. It's caused by our mortal mind, which, as St. Paul says, is enmity against God.
Mr. Martin, when I permitted you to speak, I did not license a sermon. Make your point, sir, whatever it is.
Your Honour, if I can put it another way, to talk about suffering as we see it is like sitting in a room with the blinds drawn, discussing the nature of darkness, when what's really needed is to let in the light. As the prophet Isaiah said, the people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shined.
Mr. Martin, that will do. Mr. Lorimer, have you any further questions for this witness?
Mr. Martin, it's my understanding that Christian Science believers like yourself have no time for the medical profession, that you have your own so-called healers who claim to be able to cure everything from TB to a broken leg.
No, that's not true. First of all, we don't make any such claim.
Oh, indeed you do, sir. I have here in my hand one of your pamphlets, printed here in Stirling, which is a virtual catalogue of miracle cures.
We do no more than follow Christ's own example when he healed the leper or the man stricken with palsy.
Really? And on whose authority?
None higher. You should read your Bible, sir. St. John's Gospel, chapter 14, verse 12. He that believeth on me, the works that I do, shall he do also. Matthew 16, verse 18. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall
Mr.
recover.
Lorimer, I think I'd advise another line of questioning. This is a rather one-sided contest.
Thank you, Your Honour. Mr. Martin, I don't think there's any doubt about your faith. If I can dip my toe in your waters, so to speak, a faith that can move mountains.
Remove.
I'm sorry?
The word is remove. 1 Corinthians chapter 13.
I stand corrected. But, Mr. Martin, what I want to know is why a devout Christian Scientist holding the views you have expressed in this court should have called Dr. Considine in the first place. Or perhaps last resort, if you prefer. Isn't it the case that your miraculous healing powers were having no effect whatsoever? That your faith was demonstrably failing to ease your daughter's suffering?
Christian Science has no claim to be infallible. We have our failures. So too has the medical profession.
Indeed, Mr. Martin, that is the tragedy of this case. One might say that your child, Mary Ann, was failed twice. But, to return to my question, why, given the beliefs you hold, should you have sought help from a medical practitioner? What made you go against your own deepest convictions?
Mr. Lorimer, are you a married man? No? Then I'm sure the witness can furnish you with another verse from his Bible. No doubt the one about a brawling woman in a wide house.
Your Honour, may I remind the court that the real issue here is the needless death of a child.
Well, it is sort of special, Mum. Dr. Ibbotson more or less insisted she'd stand me a dinner after my first day. I'm hardly worth a button, to be honest, but I can't let her down. She said she'd book us a table at the Ambassador Hotel. I'll likely fall asleep after the soup.
Soup? Oh, nothing so common. Vichyssoise at the very least.
Barbara, you're not going anywhere like that, surely.
Mum, I'm meeting a woman friend for dinner. I'm not trying to impress some Edinburgh solicitor.
It's the waiter you've got to impress in these places. Didn't anybody ever tell you?
No, I've had a deprived childhood. Listen, Dad, you couldn't possibly...
Give you a lift to the station before I sit down. Hungry and exhausted to my frugal meal.
Oh, yeah, less of the frugal. Oh, I'll tell Mrs. Hamilton on you.
What would you do if I said no?
How's your technique with slashed wrists?
Barbara!
No, he made mincemeat out of Lorimer, I'm afraid. And you could almost feel the whole court coming round to his side, including the sheriff. It's an awe-inspiring sight. Fanaticism. Normal people are riddled with doubt as a rule, so when somebody claims to be absolutely certain, well, it's got great pulling power.
Are you going to be in court for Considine?
I don't think so. Technically, I'm not supposed to hear the other medical evidence in the interests of impartiality. I might be recalled before that, of course. Frankly, I think the case is running away from the Crown. And the defence haven't even needed to bring in Mrs. Martin, the grieving mother.
Or maybe they don't dare.
You could be right.
Anyway, Dad, thanks a million for the lift. I'll just make it, I think.
Have a good time, Barbara. And don't thank the waiters. They'll only despise you.
Bye, Dad. Don't wake up.
Well, I make that now 25 minutes and not so much as a menu. Do you think the fellow with the napkin over his arm's catatonic? He's looking in our direction. At least he's facing our way. But he's not moved a muscle since we sat down.
Well, they did show us to our table. They know we're here.
God, Barbara, I'm starving. I skipped lunch so I could really make a pig of myself. Well, you must be hungry too.
I had a sandwich at the GRI, I think, but it seems so long ago I can hardly remember.
Small wonder, after your stunning performance for Dr. Randolph.
Oh, God. That's just what it was, a performance. Honestly, Mary, I should have known better.
Rubbish! Why the hell shouldn't you shine if there's an opportunity? This is a career, not just a vocation, you know.
Yes, I know, but still, even...
No, I suppose you're right. But don't let it worry you. It's Randolph's good opinion you need, not those Neanderthals. Oh, for heaven's sake, this is ridiculous. Watch me make a spectacle of myself. Oh my goodness, look what I've done.
Mary.
I'm so clumsy. Oh, this is so embarrassing.
That's all right, madam. No harm done. I'll just clear this up.
Oh, thank you. By the way, do you think we could have a look at the menu while you're doing that?
Wasn't this table reserved by a Dr. Ibbotson? You wouldn't rather wait, madam?
No, I think we'd rather eat now, if you don't mind. If the doctor has to wait any longer, she'll be eating the candle wax.
I beg your pardon?
I'm Dr. Ibbotson.
Oh, I see. And you wish to order now?
That's correct.
I do apologise, madam. You're not being joined by anyone later?
No, we're not. The table was reserved for two, I think.
I'll bring you a menu immediately.
And I have my own bank book, so I can even buy my own dinner. God, that's priceless, isn't it?
I don't think he believes us yet.
No, No, the real Dr. Ibbotson will appear at the door any second, in comfortable tweeds, as they say,
Mary.
and start shouting, "Imposter!"
You know, the last thing my dad said when he dropped me at the station was, "Don't thank the waiter, he'll only despise you."
I know. It's that damned inverted snobbery thing. It's so British.
Oh, I know.
What's your father working on now, incidentally?
A malpractice suit, oddly enough. Oh, it's actually quite tragic. A Christian Science family in Stirling. A daughter, about 4, with diphtheria. She died after a wrong diagnosis, and I think the grandmothers brought the action. I didn't think they had any dealings with doctors, but seemingly in this case they did, and he missed it.
Diphtheria? Well, it's not something you can miss, is it? They do consult doctors now and again, you know. Or I suppose the more open-minded ones. I once had to set a broken wrist for a Christian Science patient, a teenage girl. That wasn't treatment, though. That was what they call a mechanical adjustment.
Really? Well, I suppose if it had been anything more serious, they'd have let her get on with it.
Well, they do make extraordinary claims.
So Dad was saying. The prosecution passed some of the literature out in court, but it didn't produce the desired effect. The jury were supposed to laugh, but he reckons most of them sat there goggle-eyed.
I can believe that. But they called in a GP in this instance. So who was he?
A Dr. Considine. I don't think he practices in Stirling. Do you know of him?
No, not in Edinburgh either. At least not to my knowledge. Mind you, that's confined to a square mile or two. There was a Considine in Dublin when I was there. It rings a bell, but I can't remember why. Oh, thank God at last.
Madam,
Thank you.
this evening's special is Truite aux amandes with pomme dauphinoise and haricot vert.
Thank you. And can we have the wine list, please?
The wine list? Certainly, madam.
And some bread? To gnaw, please, while we're waiting.
Of course.
He's not too happy about the wine list, is he? Probably thinks we'll do something disgraceful.
Oh, well, I'd hate to disappoint him. How do you think a wee dance on the table would go down? Good God, Barbara. There's at least 50 pairs of eyes on us. Do you realise we're the only unaccompanied women in this place? What are you going to have? How about the tweet?
Mary, don't. You're making me laugh.
Well, I'm going to order the steak Chateaubriand with an extra serving of mushrooms. I might not eat it all, but I want to see the look on his face. God, I really hate all that ladies' portion stuff, especially when I'm hungry.
Am I allowed the whole roast ox?
What? Where does it say that? Oh, God, Barbara, we're getting silly and the wine's not even arrived yet.
Dr. Considine, I'm aware the court will be already familiar with this, having listened to the testimony of other medical witnesses. But perhaps you would refresh our memory and describe for us the initial symptoms of diphtheria.
Diphtheria?
Yes, Dr. Considine, in layman's terms, of course.
Well, initially, a feeling of general malaise, loss of appetite, headache, feverishness, rapidly followed by sore throat, inflammation of the larynx, difficulty in swallowing, spasmodic coughing.
Go on, Dr. Considine.
You asked for the initial symptoms, sir. That's what I have described. These are also the early indications of croup, whooping cough.
Dr. Considine, the question concerns diphtheria. Now, among the symptoms of diphtheria specifically, wouldn't you expect to find what one standard textbook describes as morbid changes on the mucous membrane?
Perhaps.
Meaning what, Dr. Considine?
Meaning diagnosis can be extremely difficult. It depends on the circumstances.
What circumstances, for example?
Well, not every household has electric light or coins for the gas meter.
Are you saying that you were unable to examine Mary Ann Martin's throat properly because of insufficient light?
No, sir. You asked for an example of difficult circumstances.
Mr. Lorimer, is there a point to all of this? If there is, I'd be obliged if you could come to it.
No. Dr. Considine, on the evidence, it's clear that not only did you fail to diagnose Mary Ann Martin's illness and thus effectively contribute to her death, but you also failed even to consider diphtheria a possibility, despite the fact the disease was known to be rife in the area. Now, what have you to say to that?
Sir, on the latter point, I have fairly recently arrived in Stirling. I have yet to establish a practice, and while I don't offer it as an excuse, I was not aware of any local epidemic. I might add that physicians can also make mistakes by jumping to conclusions based on what seems to be prevalent. And on your first point, yes, I may have erred. Which of us hasn't? If every doctor who had made a mistaken diagnosis were to be brought into court, the streets would be full of thieves and murderers going unpunished.
Well said, sir. First bit of sense I've heard all day. Mr. Lorimer, I'll permit you one more question before we adjourn until tomorrow.
Your Honour. Dr. Considine, are you a member of the Christian Science movement?
No, sir. A victim, if you like.
Mrs. Hamilton, don't make any breakfast for me, please. I'm running late as it is.
No wonder. What on earth time did you get home last night?
Oh, don't ask. There isn't a bottle of aspirin in here, is there?
In a doctor's house? Oh, you'll have a piece of toast, surely.
Oh.
Now, you can't go out on an empty stomach. Your mother's in the dining room. There's coffee just put out.
Thanks, Mrs. Hamilton, but I daren't miss that train.
Telephone.
Oh, no. Mum, are you sure it's for me?
Yes, dear, it's Dr. Ibbotson.
Mary? Oh, God, like death warmed up. Oh, yes, wonderful. Listen, Mary, I've really got to dash or I'll miss my train. What? Oh, you're not serious? In Dublin, honestly? Oh, God, yes, put it in the post, please. No, wait. He'll say it's unethical or something, I'm sure he will. What about the solicitor? Oh, let me think. Oh, my mind's gone blank. I'll never touch another drop. Lorimer? I've got it, yes, that's his name. Lorimer. Oh, Mary, I haven't a clue. Well, I don't think it'll be Stirling. Oh, yes, it could be. I don't know how you check these things.
Now, gentlemen, you will have observed the patient's pulse, which is clearly abnormal. Mr. Pritchard, perhaps you can describe it for us?
It's very extreme, exaggerated. A sudden kind of surge, and then
Up 1 minute, down the next.
Yes, sir.
It's a pity your observation isn't matched by your powers of expression, Mr. Pritchard. Mr. O'Donnell, perhaps you can furnish us with a more professional description? Do remember, gentlemen, that you're entering a profession and a very significant proportion of your status will derive from your mastery of professional language. Inaccessible to ordinary mortals, of course. Mr. O'Donnell, how would you describe this patient's pulse?
Well, sir, there's a very sharp rise to full expansion, and that's followed by immediate collapse.
Yes, that's much better. Like a steam hammer, Mr. Pritchard, wouldn't you say?
Yes, sir.
It's known as Corrigan's pulse. Make a note of it, Mr. Pritchard, along with the word collapse. And no doubt some clinician will be standing here in a few years' time describing Pritchard's dysphasia. Corrigan's pulse, gentlemen, symptomatic of aortic incompetence or insufficiency, and a clear indication of what? Mr. McDade? Come on.
Corrigan's disease.
Brilliant! Yes, Corrigan's disease. Much to Mr. McDade's astonishment, he's got it right. Mr. O'Donnell, what can you tell us about Corrigan's disease?
It's a form of aortic regurgitation.
Yeah, that's good. Go on.
Well, sir, it's when the blood leaks from the aorta back into the left ventricle during diastole. It's caused by the aortic valve not closing properly.
Yes, exactly. Well done, Mr. O'Donnell. A sound professional answer.
Dr. Randolph, I'm terribly sorry I missed my train this morning. It won't happen again, I promise. I had a very urgent phone
Miss
call.
Wallace, I don't want to hear any excuses. Your tardiness could mean life or death to a patient, and as far as I'm concerned, it's even worse than that. Failure to be in place when I start my round is the sin against the Holy Ghost, which not even God can forgive. It's unprofessional, Miss Wallace. Take the rest of the day off. Catch up on your reading. You may join us tomorrow morning if you're on time. Now, Mr. O'Donnell, Corrigan's disease. What can you tell us about the likely prognosis?
Dr. Wallace, to return briefly to the issue of fatally wrong diagnosis, which is at the heart of this case, can you think of any reason, apart from incompetence, why Dr. Considine might have neglected to examine Mary Ann Martin specifically for diphtheria?
No.
Are you quite certain?
Mr. Lorimer, I doubt if even Dr. Wallace can read a fellow practitioner's mind. Come to the point, please.
Sorry, Your Honour. Dr. Wallace, in the evidence you gave to this court earlier, you described the administration of an antitoxin, which I believe is nowadays standard practice.
That's correct.
Is it an effective remedy for diphtheria?
It is, yes.
How effective exactly?
Well, there have been no clinical trials to my knowledge, but...
And why is that?
I couldn't say with any authority, but a clinical trial of any new drug, say, would normally entail withholding it from a control group of sufferers.
Allowing them to die, presumably, to prove a point.
That's one way of putting it.
Mr. Lorimer, will you kindly permit your witness to answer the question you've asked him? Continue, Dr. Wallace, please.
Well, there are no reliable statistics for the reason I've given, but deaths from diphtheria have declined very sharply since the antitoxin treatment was introduced at the end of last century. If I can perhaps draw a parallel where statistics are available, anti-tetanus serum, which functions in much the same way, was first widely used during the Great War, where it reduced mortality from tetanus-infected wounds from a figure of 30 deaths per 1,000 to virtually none.
And you would agree that diphtheria antitoxin has had almost equally dramatic results?
Yes, I believe so.
And Dr. Wallace, would you tell the court how that antitoxin, which has saved the lives of many hundreds, perhaps thousands of people, is manufactured?
Yes. It's prepared by injecting a horse with the diphtheria bacillus in increasing doses to render the horse immune. The anti-tetanus serum is incidentally produced by the same method. At any rate, the horse's blood, which is then antitoxic, is drawn off, allowed to coagulate, and the serum is filtered out.
And this serum, the antitoxin you've described, is then routinely administered to human beings, children, such as Mary Ann Martin, suffering from diphtheria.
That is correct.
Thank you. Your Honour, I would like to introduce as evidence a pamphlet which I received only this morning, but which I think has a direct bearing on this case.
I should hope it has, Mr. Lorimer. I should also hope it is not another recital of miracle cures or biblical quotations.
No, Your Honour. It is a pamphlet printed in Dublin some 3 years ago. A polemic, one could only describe it as virulent, against vivisection and indeed any use whatsoever of animals in medicine. Now, the arguments, such as they are familiar, and I don't intend to waste the court's time with lengthy quotation.
For this relief, much thanks, Mr. Lorimer.
I will, Your Honour, however, draw the court's attention to the fact that both diphtheria and tetanus antitoxins come under violent attack on account of the pain allegedly inflicted on horses during their preparation and their unnatural character. The author of this pamphlet, named on the back page, is one Dr. Eugene Considine.
Oh!
Hi. Mind if I join you?
You needn't bother. I'm just about to go. I hope you didn't get that from me.
No, of course not. I always buy 2 cups of coffee. I like drinking the second one cold. Come on, cheer up. It's not the end of the world.
That's original.
Look, you're not going to make me sit here on my own with 2 coffees and 2 fly cemeteries. People will think I've been stood up.
So, you'll just be embarrassed.
That was awful this morning.
Some people enjoyed it. I think it's called Schadenfreude.
Sorry, I didn't do French.
It means taking a perverse delight in other people's... Oh, God. I fell right into that. Showing off again.
Listen, you don't want to let those 2 bother you. If you'd heard what Pritchard had to take before you arrived, Randolph even invented a new syndrome for him. Pritchard's dysphasia.
Oh, well, he deserves it.
Oh, come on, Barbara. He's just a wee bit slow, same as you were just a wee bit late. You're not looking your best, actually. A late night?
Whatever happened to gallantry?
Sorry. Here, do you take sugar?
Thanks. No sugar.
Was it a late night?
Inquisitive, aren't you? Well, yes, it was, as a matter of fact. Someone I'd been working with in Edinburgh, Dr. Ibbotson, took me to dinner at the Ambassador Hotel. Do you know it?
Are you kidding? What, is he a consultant or something?
What? Runs a mother and child clinic in the city centre.
I see. It'll be like printing your own money, that, I suppose. Well, no wonder you were late. I'm surprised you came in at all. Did he give you a lift?
If you must know, he's a she. It's Dr. Mary Ibbotson, and the clinic's in Jeffrey Street. You can draw your own conclusions about the patients and the money.
Really? And you worked there?
I did. I had a couple of months' residency, mainly obstetrics, some novice midwifery.
My God, you'd have seen life in the raw there. I am impressed.
What? Did you think I spent all my time in the library?
You have got a sore head, haven't you?
I'm sorry. I didn't get much sleep. I'd probably missed the train anyway, but I had a phone call just as I was rushing out the door.
Well, it's a natural law, isn't it? That, and when you just stepped into the bath.
I couldn't ignore it. It was Dr. Ibbotson. My father's in Stirling Sheriff Court this week. One of those cases where the parents refuse medical treatment for a child on religious grounds.
God, I don't envy him.
Well, this is even more of a hornet's nest. There's a malpractice charge come out of it, and she phoned with a really important bit of information.
So you couldn't exactly hang up on her?
Oh, indeed, no. I wouldn't do that anyway. Not after she paid for my crêpe Suzette flambé.
Sublime, eh? Here, try the ridiculous.
Fly cemetery?
I'll call it a fruit slice, if you insist. Oh, no.
What's the matter?
It's those 2.
Well, look who it is. You don't give up, do you, Paddy?
Hey, Paddy, are you sure that's wise?
It'd be too much to hope they could keep their mouths shut, wouldn't it?
Look, I'd better go. I should have gone straight home anyway.
Oh, whisper.
It's a conspiracy.
You'd better watch it, Paddy. These women are only after one thing.
Aye, a husband, so they can quit work. She'll never last the pace.
What, are you giving up already, Babs?
Right, bye. Thanks for the coffee.
Barbara, don't let them... Barbara! Oh.
Dr. Considine, you gave evidence earlier to the effect that you were not in any way connected with the Christian Science movement. That you were a simple general practitioner whose presence in this court is the result of nothing more sinister than accident, human error, such as we all at one time or another commit.
Mr. Lorimer, I have asked you to be brief. Put your question, please, without preamble.
Your Honour, I feel it is necessary to remind the court under which flag Dr. Considine has been sailing, so that we may be better able to assess his culpability in this tragic business.
Flags? Sailing? Get on with it.
Your Honour, Dr. Considine, do you recognise this pamphlet?
Yes.
Is this your writing? You are responsible for the content of this pamphlet. It bears your name.
Then I suppose I must be.
Printed and presumably circulated in Dublin 3 years ago. Would you agree, Dr. Considine, that this is a polemic? employing at times some violence of expression against the use of animals in medicine, including the manufacture of diphtheria antitoxin.
I'm not sure I understand.
Understand what, Dr. Considine? It is a polemic, surely?
I know what a polemic is, sir. I don't know what you mean by violence of expression.
Dr. Considine, that is a red herring. The point is that
Mr.
you...
Lorimer, the panel has a right to ask for clarification.
Your Honour, I had no wish to engage in further lengthy quotation. The point is simple enough.
Your Honour, may I be permitted to speak?
You may, Doctor, but please no flags or red herrings.
Your Honour, I am being asked to defend my writings on an issue which I will admit concerns me deeply, but which has no direct bearing on this case.
Dr. Considine, that is for me to decide. I have already allowed this pamphlet to be produced in evidence, if that's all you have to say.
Your Honour, I have a simple request to make. Mr. Lorimer has characterised my language as violent. He is entitled to his opinion, of course. One man's violence is another man's righteous anger. However, the implication, whether he intends it or not, is that I am a violent man, which I would hotly deny.
Dr. Considine, you mentioned a request.
Yes, simply that Your Honour and the members of the jury be given the opportunity to read this pamphlet for themselves.
Oh, Your Honour, is this necessary? Surely the point is...
Your Honour, this is not a lengthy document, 6 or 7 pages. And despite what has been said, very little polemic. Indeed, it consists mostly of photographs.
Mr. Lorimer, let me see that. Good God Almighty.
No, Lorimer walked right into it. He's young, he'll learn. It didn't really matter what he said in his closing address. All the jury had on their minds was that poor woman, Mrs. Martin, who was too distraught even to appear in court, and those wretched animals in Considine's pamphlet.
Oh, don't tell me about them, David. I don't think I could stomach it.
The jury certainly couldn't. And juries have a sort of herd instinct at times. Anybody that wanted to stop what was going on in that literature of his had to be on the side of the angels. From what I gather, somebody just handed the pamphlet in at Lorimer's office in Edinburgh. He must have thought he'd struck oil, but it backfired on him with a vengeance.
Yes. Do you think the father did it deliberately? You know, got Considine to attend, him specifically, knowing he was an anti-vivisectionist, so that he wouldn't treat the child. How much did Martin know?
He's no fool, that's for sure. And Considine did treat her, after a fashion.
So he was going against his principles, wasn't he? Even calling a doctor in.
He was certainly under pressure from his wife and her mother. Lorimer might have made more of the family's past history. He really needed to enlist the jury's sympathies for the Martin kids, the way Considine did for those poor animals. But whether Martin just caved in and by chance called out the wrong doctor, or whether Considine made a genuine mistake,
Or whether the whole thing was a conspiracy. No, it passes belief.
I would like to think so. I really would. But conspiracies are about power, and people do some strange things to get power, and to hang on to it. There was a fair amount of biblical quotation being batted back and forth in court, and I couldn't help thinking about what I suppose is my least favourite Old Testament story.
Abraham and Isaac.
Aye.
It's mine too.
Well, you'll be glad it's all over.
Oh, why, I'll get back to my real trade, opening up cadavers.
David!
Oh, I spoke too soon. I hope that's not D.C. Curran.
Would serve you right.
Dr. Wallace, there's a lady who'd like a word with you. It's a Mrs. Telfer.
Thank you, Mrs. Hamilton. Telfer. That rings a bell. Oh, God, it's the grandmother.
Who?
The Martins' grandmother. Mrs. Martin's mother.
David! Barbara, what's she doing here?
Mrs. Telfer, I'm terribly sorry. I really am, but I don't think there's much I can do.
Dr. Wallace, I don't want to take up your time. I just didn't know who to turn to. It's the other Waynes. There's two of them down with the same thing. It's wee John and Sarah. It's diphtheria again, I know it is. I've got Ruth out of that house. Thank God, she's just about dead with fright. I don't know where to go. God forgive me, I had to look up your name in the phone book. The Waynes are waiting outside. I know diphtheria when I see a doctor. I just couldn't leave her there.
Mrs. Telford, I can't treat the children.
Oh, Doctor.
There's nothing here. If they're ill, they need to go into hospital right away. I'm sorry, but I can't.
But you must know, Dr. Wallace, I heard you in court. You know what's right. I mean, after that Considine, I thought I'd never trust a doctor again. I was just so...
Mrs. Telford, hold on. Wait here a second. Mrs. Hamilton, would you bring Mrs. Telford a cup of tea? Sit there for a minute. I'll see what I can do.
Thank you, Doctor.
Barbara, have you got Dr. Ibbetson's address or her phone number?
David, what on earth is it?
Oh, yes, I have, but she'll be at the clinic.
David, what's going on? What does she want?
It's the other Martin children. They've contracted diphtheria.
Oh, no.
Oh, my God. Oh, well, they were bound to. Of course they were.
Do you think she'd treat them, Barbara? It's urgent.
What?
Dr. Ibbetson, would you phone her? I'll get them all into the car. Do you think she'd mind getting involved?
Oh, Dad, absolutely not. I'll phone her right now.
In Hand in Glove, the part of Mr. Lorimer was played by Paul Young, Dr. Wallace by Martin James, and Barbara by Meg Fraser. Mrs. Wallace was played by Jan Moffat, Mrs. Hamilton by Grace Glover, and the Sheriff by Andrew Conlon. Dr. Randolph was played by Alec Heggie, Dr. Considine by Michael Percival Maxwell, and McDade by Alex Harvey. O'Donnell was played by Raymond Short, Martin by Bob Docherty, and Dr. Ibbetson by Louise Beattie. Other parts were played by members of the cast.